What is a shinobi? Naruto was truly stumped by the question. In the academy, they had been told that a ninja protects the village and everyone in it, the will of fire. They had been regaled with tales of glory and power of all the previous Hokages. Naruto's favorite was, of course, the Yondaime Hokage. He was a hero, plain and simple, and the whole village agreed on this fact. He saved the entire village by defeating the Kyuubi and giving up his life in the process. In fact, he may have been the one to defeat the Kyuubi, but he wasn't the only one to die. Many had that terrible night. So, Naruto was convinced he would a super awesome ninja, saving princesses from evil monsters and save the day. Team 7's most recent mission was instrumental in showing Naruto that he wasn't as godlike as he had previously believed. Hell, it had been such a shock that it had shook Naruto's whole perception of what a shinobi even was. Sure, in the heat of the moment, and at seeing Zabuza dismiss Haku's sacrifice so easily, he had given him a well-deserved speech about a ninja protecting those precious to him and doing the right thing. At first, he had believed himself the hero and Zabuza the evil, bad guy. But now, having been through the mission, the sun-kissed blonde ninja in the orange jumpsuit can safely admit, though he hated being wrong, that his belief had been terribly childish. Why had he thought himself the good guy and Zabuza the bad guy? Just because he was from Konoha, does that mean he was the good guy? After all, wasn't Zabuza just taking the mission like Team 7 for money? And unlike Team 7, Zabuza had more noble intentions: to free his country and village from the tyranny of the Mizukage. Again, Zabuza's words about being a shinobi rang in his head. When you've hovered between life and death that it doesn't faze you, then you can be called a ninja. When you become so deadly that your profile has been entered into my bingo book, then you may have earned the title ninja. He had believed himself godlike. It had only taken him one look at the likes of Zabuza and Haku, even his own sensei, fighting to know that how terribly outclassed he really was. That only meant one thing: he was nowhere near ready or worthy to call himself a ninja. Additionally, even Kakashi-sensei hadn't objected when Zabuza had told them that shinobi are just tools for the village, to use and to be used. Is that really what he was? A mere tool? No, that can't be it. The Yondaime was no tool. He was a hero. All this deep thinking was driving Naruto's head in. Ugh! Naruto grumbled to himself, grabbing his head. I hate this, he said, walking without thinking through the park he usually walks in. As usual, the team training today had been fairly useless. All Kakashi had told them was to focus on their basics whilst he sparred with Sasuke. What was so special about him anyway? And what's with that creepy Sharingan eye? So what that Sasuke has it? Naruto deserved training too. Granted, he wasn't as godlike as he had first thought, but he was still better than the team, hands down. Granted, Naruto didn't know how he had kicked Haku's ass when the older girl-looking boy was so faster and better than him. But still, he had done it. He should be the one being rewarded with training, not stuck-up duck-butt hair. He didn't even know why so many girls liked Sasuke, what Naruto wouldn't do for that kind of attention. To be fair, there was only one girl he liked, but every time he even asked her out, it proved to be a painful mistake. Sakura might not look strong, but damn, her punches hurt like hell. And if he was being honest, he was getting a little tired of being her punching bag. He didn't even know why she hit him like that every time. Did she hate him that much? Or is he really that annoying? Ever since he could remember, the villagers had treated him like utter crap. True, the beatings at their hands had decreased over the years since he had gotten much faster and can outrun the mobs who organized the fox hunt. That was another thing he couldn't figure out. No matter how much he tried to reason it, he couldn't see a reason for the villagers' hatred. Sure, Mizuki team knew it, but before he could even say it, Irika-sensei had stabbed him and nearly killed him. And then he was arrested by those mask-wearing Yinbyu ninja. They looked so cool, he had to admit. With their matching uniforms, cloaks, and masks, they looked super awesome. And every time he even asked the Sandaime, the old man replied with the same twinkling eyes and the answer, People hate what they don't understand, Naruto-kun. Someday, they will come to see you for what you are. What help was that? Sure, the old man sometimes hung out with him, eating ramen and fish they caught from the rivers, but that was when he was young. Even that had become less and less over the years. Haku had told him that to become strong, he needed to fight to protect something precious. But then, what did Naruto have that is precious to him? The wave mission had opened his eyes in ways than one. Naruto had thought that his team was coming to accept him. But even after defeating Zabuza and Haku, and then Zabuza killing Gato, all Sakura was worried about his team. Even Kakashi-sensei had berated Naruto a lot on not thinking properly before acting and not working properly with Sasuke. Sasuke. Everything just had to be about him. Ugh, it drove him insane. Team building exercises. That's what they waste time on every training session they have. And it's not like they work anyway. Their teamwork was worse than before they went on the mission to Wave. And everyone was convinced that it was his fault somehow. What is he supposed to do when Sasuke is still a big jerk and that Sakura fawns over him instead of trying to work with Naruto? What was he trying to protect that was so precious to him? A team that dislikes him? A sensei that doesn't train him? The villagers that despise him for some unknown reason? Naruto was well aware that he now moping and sulking, rather like Sasuke, but right now, his perceptions of the village and his beliefs about what it meant to be a shinobi were going through a major setback. He was lucky he wasn't freaking out or shouting at the top of his lungs. Naruto could admit that he had a tendency to do that. But that is usually when someone puts him down or ridicules his own super awesome dream of being Hokage. He just couldn't stand for being ridiculed like that. At first, he thought the girl Hinata was cool, that she could be his friend. And for a while, it looked like it was true as well. Kakashi-sensei had sent his dog, Pakun, to get reinforcement from Konoha when it looked like Zabuza was still alive. As a result, the Sandaime had sent Team 8 under Kurenai-sensei. She was one hot woman. Naruto had to keep his eyes off of her multiple times lest he get distracted by those weird thoughts. But he had been beaten up by Sakura too many times to know looking at an older woman, a jounin, no matter how beautiful, would end up with him in pain. Regardless, after the battle on the bridge, Hinata had even rubbed healing salve on his wounds. That was the first time Naruto had anyone worry about him, and it had warmed his heart. And like the fool he was, he had entertained thoughts of being Hinata's friend. They had even trained a couple of times whilst Kakashi-sensei was recovering. But then, he and Kiba had gotten into an argument about which of them was stronger. Naruto had held such high hopes that after all his training, tree climbing, and even defeating Haku, Hinata would see that he had improved since his time in the academy. Granted, she had been knocked out during his fight with Haku, but she had still agreed with Kiba. Even though she had apologized to Naruto, she had said that Kiba was stronger of the two. Maybe she was just being loyal to her teammate. Who knows? But in the end, she had turned out like the rest of them, just like his own teammates. What a disappointment. So, who was precious to him? All of a sudden, Naruto was falling like something had tripped him, nose first into the ground. Ow, 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 Naruto grumbled, holding his bruised face as he looked up, and there was nothing in front of him that could have tripped him. Are you a shinobi? Someone said, making Naruto turn around. Are you a shinobi? Came the voice from behind him, making him turn around. Perhaps he should have kept his temper, but upon seeing the villager like the ones who usually ridicule him, all his anger and frustration that Naruto had been bottling up came to the surface. His normally smiling face adopted a look of rage, knowing that this old man was going to shout at him for being a demon brat. Who knows why? And he yelled, "Of course I am. Are you blind, old man?" Sheesh, what a stupid jerk. Not even asking him if he was okay when Naruto stood there, clutching his broken nose which still oozed blood. What nightmare. And how the hell had he fallen anyway? There was nothing in front of him? Was he getting so clumsy that he was tripping over his own 2 feet now? I don't know, the man continued. You neither have your headband, nor do you look like a shinobi. Ugh, that did it. It's not his fault he lost his headband in the fight against Haku on the bridge. Stupid old jerk. Naruto whipped his head around. What do you know about being a shinobi anyway? I am Naruto Uzumaki, and I will be the greatest Hokage ever. Believe it, he shouted, pointing his thumb at the grizzled old man. He was feeling confrontational, and this jerk was the first one to bother him when he was busy thinking about important thing. So, he was going to bear the brunt of it. But unlike what he had been expecting, the old man merely raised one eyebrow at him. Even through that, nothing about his expression changed. For all it looked like, it was as if the man was seeing through him. That if anything bothered him and his anger rose. How insulting. Naruto marched up to the man and glared in the man's eyes. Or eye, as it were. Now that he saw it, half of the man's face was covered by bandages, including his right eye, as was his right arm, in which he held a wooden walking stick. Perhaps he might have been a shinobi at one time, but a shitty one obviously if he got himself beat up like this. But the man didn't laugh at him like the rest of the villagers did whenever he proclaimed his dream of becoming Hokage. Maybe he was deaf as well, or hard of hearing at least. Wouldn't be that surprising given his injuries. Well, Naruto asked impatiently, narrowing his eyes at the grizzled old man. Well, what? The man asked, his face impassive as always. It is clear you are not a ninja. The man looked Naruto up and down, and for a moment his face adopted a sneer that Naruto had seen many times in the faces of many people. And he hated it. There's nothing wrong with my jumpsuit, Naruto insisted indignantly. Orange is great. Okay, maybe that wasn't exactly the reason he was fond of his jumpsuit, but the point still held. If you want to get killed, yes, the man replied without any hesitation. Yeah, well, I don't care what you think, old. Naruto turned to leave, but something caught his sight. Or scent, as it were. He couldn't explain it, but ever since the Battle of Wave, his sense of smell had increased by quite a bit. Nothing as extreme as an Inuzuka, but it was noticeable, and his improved nose told him that someone was near. Near, but he couldn't see them, which instantly put Naruto on edge. He had been attacked by idiotic villagers, too many to be at ease with one of them, especially whilst alone in said park, which he could have sworn had quite a few people strolling about. Something fishy was going on here, and Naruto didn't like it. There was a distinct smell of lavender in the air. There, something just moved in the shadows by the trees, a few meters behind the bench the old man was sitting on. Whoever it was, Naruto couldn't sense them. Neither could he see them. But they were there nonetheless. Naruto's hand inched towards his kunai pouch. He reeled back in shock as he felt for it on his leg. It wasn't there. What the hell was going on? But then the man spoke again. It seems you learnt nothing from Kakashi after all, Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto whipped his head around to shoot a glare at the man, now certain this creep was up to something. How do you know he's my sensei? Naruto said, readying himself to fight at any moment's notice. This was getting creepier by the second. I never said he was your sensei, the man nonchalantly, as if discussing the weather. What the? Naruto started, then rubbed his hand on his forehead. He didn't have time to deal with this senile old man. You just said, you know what, forget it. Usually, Naruto was never one to run away from a challenge or a fight, but his recent mission had really put him on edge and made him suspicious and untrusting of his own abilities. For the most part. I said you didn't learn anything from Kakashi, the man added. I never mentioned him being your sensei, boy. That information you gave me yourself. Naruto added his azure eyes at the man, glaring angrily. Why you? He hated being used, and this man had done it so seamlessly and effortlessly that made Naruto's blood boil. What is a shinobi's greatest weapon? The man asked, cocking his head to side and leaning on his stick, looking at Naruto curiously. Why was he asking him such basic academy questions anyway? Irika Sensei had literally beat it into his head. His mind, the creep had the audacity to shake his head. No. Think it through. What? What did he mean no? Stupid. Old man doesn't know shit. Why was Naruto here anyway? Arguing with the fool. Of course, it's his mind, Naruto exclaimed, waving his arms around. Other weapons like kunai, shuriken or swords are just tools. Still, the old man just shook his head. Repeating your answer will not make it right. He was really starting to get on Naruto's nerves. Que whatever. Naruto waved his hand and prepared to leave, but was once again halted by the man. Sit, the man said, motioning to the empty seat in front of him. Naruto hesitated for but a moment. This man may have been a shinobi at one time, but he was too old and too injured to do anything now. And if he tried, Naruto would hand him ass-withered ass. The man with the cross on his chin pointed to the board on the wooden table in front of him. It's called Go, he informed him. Do you know how to play? Naruto sat there dumbfounded. What the fuck was going on? Where did the board suddenly come from? He could have sworn there was nothing there just a minute ago, and the man hadn't even moved. Very clearly, something was wrong, and Naruto had absolutely no idea what was going on. How come things were just appearing out of nowhere all of a sudden? Did it have something to do with this weird board game that he had seen Shikamaru playing sometimes in the academy? All Naruto saw a wooden board with a lot of boxes and two bowls of pebbles, one filled with black and the other white. Remembering that the man had asked him a question, Naruto forced himself to reply, ignoring the weirdness of this encounter for now. No, he shook his head. The man hadn't done anything remotely threatening, but something about him just screamed dangerous. Though Naruto had no idea why. Maybe it was his emotionless face, or perhaps it was the way he sat completely still, yet still looking relaxed somehow. Whatever it was, it gave Naruto the distinct impression that the man had forgiven his earlier petulance, but was not to be tested further, and that doing so would be hazardous to his health. And not knowing why he got this impression bothered him even more. All in all, the blond boy sat opposite the old man, deeply uncomfortable and not a little perturbed. The distinct lack of wind, which had been there before and which he had definitely noticed, increased his tension further. The man had seemingly expected his lack of knowledge in a boring game and quickly summarized the rules for him. Basically, he had to get the most points by the end of the game to win. To get points, you capture opponents' stones called prisoners or capture empty territories. The man told him as he placed black bead on his side and then revolved the board around so they were facing Naruto. You place your stones on the intersections. The intersections around them are called liberties, and when they're taken by your enemy, the prisoner surrounded is captured. Ignoring the distinct impression that this meeting wasn't by chance, Naruto nodded, and the game began. 10 minutes in, he had lost when all of his territories and prisoners were captured, with Naruto having no idea what had just happened. Again, Naruto proclaimed, and they reset the board. Starting with only 4 pieces yet again, they set off. Who are you? Naruto asked when a man captured his primary territory yet again, just after he had managed to capture 2 of his prisoners. Every move he made seemed to have been for nothing. For the first and a half an hour or so since Naruto had been talking to this strange man, Naruto saw his crooked little smile, and it creeped him out further. You tell me, Naruto Uzumaki. He hated board games, and he hated mind games, and they seemed to be playing both. How the hell can I tell you? I don't know you. The man sighed. Seems you really didn't learn anything from Kakashi. As talented as he is, it is a wonder. Naruto bristled yet again, not liking this at all. Hey, I defeated Haku in Wave, and I mastered tree walking in only 2 days. The man smirked and shook his head. What is it that Kakashi keeps saying to you, Genin? Naruto glared at him as the man, captured, leaned forward and captured 2 more of his prisoners. Damn it, he hated losing, even if they were playing on a seemingly easy but very complicated board game. Naruto spit out the first thing that came to his mind, not knowing why the man was seemingly questioning him. Look underneath the underneath. Kakashi had said it so many times that Naruto could even hear it in his sleep nowadays. But he still didn't know what the hell it even meant. Trust his lazy-ass sensei to talk in cryptic language that he didn't get. The old man nodded. Good. At least you know something. He had just about had it with his constant ridiculing statements when he realized that this creep was testing him. Who was he to test the most amazing genin in the Rookie 9? The man merely raised his eyebrow at Naruto, obviously expecting him to continue. Oh, what the hell? Since he was already playing this creep's game, why not go all the way and see what the hell he wanted with him? He was getting tired of being defeated in this game anyway. You're not a civilian, Naruto started, looking at him squarely in the eye. Oh, the man said. Why is that? Other than the fact you seem to know Kakashi-sensei, you also know what tree walking is. You've obviously also heard what happened at Wave, or you would have asked who Haku was. And I sensed that this meeting was not a coincidence. And Naruto knew there were other signs as well. You asked me a question they teach us at the academy. I could have just heard about it, the man replied, waving his one good hand. I don't know. Your injury suggests that you're a retired ninja, and that you got your ass handed to you by someone, Naruto added, leaning back. Your eyes too sharp, and you seem to think you know what a shinobi is. Good, the man nodded, seemingly satisfied with his answer. But not good enough. Now let me tell you what I realized in our meeting. You have pathetic knowledge of the basics. You didn't pay enough attention in class, or perhaps your knowledge was sabotaged and you did nothing to correct it. You give information much too easily. One merely has to get you angry. For example, all I said was you didn't learn anything from Kakashi. It was you who supplied the information that he was your sensei. You yourself gave away the information on your current skill level and even your most recent mission. Another mistake. I could have just as easily been an enemy or a spy. Naruto's heart sank at the same time as speeding up as he realized the creep was right. His senses were on high alert now. Was this man an enemy? Why did he come after him, though? The man didn't seem to be giving any attention to increased apprehension. Your senses are sharp, however, particularly your nose. But the fact that it took you a while to realize that someone was watching you, other than me, shows that it is a new development. Your taijutsu is horrendous, giving the sloppy defensive stance you attempted to settle in. And you know it, which is why you immediately went towards your kunai pouch, which tells me that your shuriken jutsu is at least marginally better. You're also horrible at jinjutsu, detecting or dispelling it. Because you did not notice the one hiding the go box, neither did you notice the jinjutsu placed on you when your kunai pouch was taken, or the jinjutsus making those tree appear further than they are. All in all, if I was an enemy, you would have died at least 4 times over within the first few minutes of our meeting. Naruto sat there, stunned at the creep's assessment of his abilities. Only Irika-sensei knew more than this about him, and this man had learnt all of this within a few minutes of meeting him. Needless to say, Naruto was freaked out, but then, slowly a grin stretched over his lips. So, this is what a shinobi was. The old man was simply awesome. Before Naruto could beg him to train him, the man stood up, signaling the end of their meeting. No, it was too early. Naruto jumped up, intent on making him wait a few more minutes. Now then, tell me, what is a shinobi's greatest weapon? The man asked his question again, stepping out from behind the wooden table. Naruto now knew the answer beyond a shadow of a doubt. It seems Irika-sensei was wrong. Deception. The man smiled, and Naruto felt the very rare warmth blossoming inside him when he got a question right in class. Until next time, Naruto Uzumaki, the man started walking away. Wait, Naruto exclaimed, jogging the few steps the man had walked. I have a question. But before he could say what it was, the man seemed to know what it was. I will not train you, Uzumaki. Crestfallen, Naruto nodded, but he refused to let this genius old man go without at least learning something he needed to know. Okay, but tell me something else, please. A raised eyebrow was the only response he got. He got the impression that the man's patience was running out and hurriedly asked him the question that had been bugging him ever since the fight on the bridge. What is a shinobi? Naruto could have sworn he saw something like approval on the man's face before vanished too quickly. Instead of answering, the man delved a hand deeper in his robe, and Naruto tensed for just a moment. But he needn't have, because the man drew from within his robes a book. What the hell? First a game, then a book. Why did he get the impression that this old man knew the Sandaime? There are some things you have to figure out yourself, he said, tossing the book to him. And before Naruto could process what had happened, faster than his eyes could follow, faster than even Haku, the old man had vanished. He moved even faster than Kakashi-sensei, and without leaving the cloud of smoke that his sensei did. Who was this man? Naruto looked down at the book in his hands. The Way a Shinobi Dies by Tobarama Senju. Naruto. Sakura screamed, clenching her fist in front of her and bumping Naruto on the head as soon as he came within range. You're late, Baka. Naruto wondered for but a second whether to call her out on her behavior, but decided against it. As much as deception rubbed against his nerves, he had to admit, especially after reading Tobarama's notes on how a shinobi fights, he needed to preserve their impression of him, for now. Naruto rubbed his head, all the while grinning up at her. Sakura-chan, that hurts. I overslept, Gomen. He could see Sakura grind her teeth in frustration. Sasuke had his usual self-satisfied smirk. Che dobe, he muttered under his breath. Shut up, team. Naruto yelled back, prompting another quick punch to his head from the pink-haired fangirl. He had been ready for her yell the moment he stepped on to the training ground 7 in view of his teammates. Sasuke, as usual, was sulking under a tree, and Sakura, also as usual, hovering near him. Secretly, Naruto was quite pleased with his senses having increased this much. He had been able to tell where, in particular, his teammates were standing. Teammates was a stupid word for what they are. They can barely qualify as a team as it is. But looking at the broody bastard reminded him of something he thought of last night as he read the book the old man had given him. Although he didn't know the creep's name, it was quite clear to him that the man was a big admirer of the second Hokage. And it wasn't difficult to see that now that he has read halfway through the memoir of the Naruto. His demeanor was exactly how Tobarama-sama has outlined in it, although he had a feeling that it was added later on and not published within the book. Did the old man do it? Regardless, it didn't matter to him right now. Not when he needed to research the Uchiha clan. He had briefly seen the weird Sharingan eye of both Kakashi-sensei and Sasuke. From what Haku had observed and Zabuza said, it can read, decipher, and copy all hand signs, ninjutsu, and jinjutsu. That made it highly dangerous. How unfair was that? He would be damned if he let the team copy his one useful jutsu. Although, there was no telling he hadn't already done it. Naruto had used it quite a few times against Haku after Sasuke had awakened his freaky eyes. The problem was the hateful woman at the library wouldn't even let him in there, much less look up anything concerning the Uchiha clan. The moment he asked for it, he was certain it would elicit a stampede from the team's fans defending him. Maybe the old man had some information on the now nearly extinct clan. Naruto had been quick to get a bingo book as soon as they had returned from Wave, remembering what Zabuza had said about them. When you are deadly enough to be entered in my bingo book, then you may have earned the title ninja. And reading through the book, it was very, very obvious that Naruto didn't rank anywhere near the most powerful shinobi in the world. For what he saw, ninjas were ranked the same as ninja missions. The least dangerous ones, usually runaway genin and academy students, ranged from D to E. Then shunins with no special ability ranged were usually C, while those with a Kekkagenkai were B ranked. There was a decent bounty on their return to the village they defected from, or to the village which has put the bounty on the ninja. Then came the powerful shinobi like Kakashi-sensei and Zabuza. Both were ranked, which are amongst the most powerful shinobi in the world, next only to the Kages and S-ranked ninja. It had shocked him to the core to see that Sasuke's older brother, Itachi, was S-ranked with an order to kill on sight, but only with backup. If encountered alone, the ninja was ordered to flee right away. No wonder the team was so obsessed with getting strong. His brother was one of the most powerful shinobi in the world. Naruto inwardly grinned. He would no way make it obvious that his new ideal of strength was not Kakashi or even the Sandaime, but Itachi himself. He was determined to one day be stronger than the older Uchiha, and he never went back on his word. The chirping birds brought him back from his internal musings and reminded him of the present. All his dreams would have to wait. There was no way he was getting stronger by waiting for his perpetually late sensei to show up. Apparently, they were to have a mission today. Finally, Sakura's loud shout alerted them. "You're late." "Nuh, nuh. You see, I was on my way here, but a black cat crossed my path and I had to go around all the way across the village." Their sensei, without a pause, his smut book in front of his face, as usual. "Liar," both Naruto and Sakura yelled. Naruto did, merely to keep up the pretense. If anything, he had learnt that his lazy-ass sensei was scarily observant. And who knows what the sensei will say about his changing outlook on ninja life. Well, now that we are here, let's get going. Kakashi turned around and led them all the way to the Hokage Tower. A few people were already milling about, shinobi and civilian alike. Naruto ignored the cold stares he received, as well as the admiring gazes Sasuke attracted. Although the latter brew his jealousy savagely, he managed to smother it down. What was it that he had that Naruto didn't? Was it the looks? No, that can't be it. Maybe it was the noble clan and his heritage? The soft bell of the assistant's desk tinkered as they pushed the door of the office open. The pretty brunette looked up at their entrance. Unlike other people in the tower, and indeed, in the academy, the assistants the old man Gigi hired were always good to him. "Yo," Naruto beamed at the girl. "How you doing, Izumi?" The girl smiled at him, replying, "Very well, Naruto-san," then looked toward Kakashi. Naruto, who had been trying to be more observant ever since the old man admonished him for it, noticed the reddening of her face. So weird. Hinata did the same thing. "Izumi, you okay?" Naruto said concernedly. "You look a little red." If anything, the girl reddened even more and replied, I'm fine, Naruto-san. Just a little fever." Oh, Naruto sighed. He had been right. "Well, get well soon." He waved and moved towards the old man's office, missing the looks of incredulousness of his teammates or the slight shake of Kakashi's head. However, Izumi's fever was the last on Naruto's mind. He was more concerned with the broody bastard that his teammate was and his clan. Maybe the old man knew something about the Uchiha clan, Naruto wondered. But he wasn't about to ask him in front of his paranoid teammate and observant sensei. Instead, he greeted the Hokage his usual way. "Hey, Gigi." Naruto grinned. That grin was soon wiped off when Sakura's fist bounced off his head. "Baka, don't call the Hokage that." Though his head pained him, his air was in threat of being cut off as Sakura captured his head in a lock with her deceptively strong arms. Ma Sakura," Kakashi lightly admonished, "is rowdy Genin. Necks aren't supposed to bend that way. Hokage-sama." The Sandaime Hokage, who most people revere as the god of shinobi, the only one to hold the title since the venerable Shodaime, Hashirama Senju, looked on at the team fondly. Kakashi was one of his strongest jounins, and the one-eyed, gray-haired man had been drowning himself in ANBU missions for too long. But now, seeing the look in his one eye, even if his face was hidden behind the mask, showed Hiruzen that giving him the Genin team was a good idea. Sakura, another Genin from civilian background, had graduated the top of her year amongst the Kunoichi. Yes, she lacked power certainly, but he was sure Kakashi was working with her on her faults. By the admiring looks, she subtly, but not subtly enough, sent the Uchiha. It seemed she still held a torch for him. Well, that wasn't anything new. He was distinctly reminded of another Uchiha merely 6 years ago, and the pang of guilt rose in his chest. An entire clan eliminated. If only. No, there was no use thinking of such things now. Sasuke was a fine shinobi. Sure, the boy had problems, but for someone who had been shown his parents' murder by his own brother using the Sharingan's capabilities, it was no wonder. Still, it was good for Sasuke to be in a team where his vengeful tendencies can be curbed and he could form friendships. The last boy, grinning at him with those shiny blue eyes, brightened his day, surely. Even if the troublesome genin had invented the most dangerous jutsu known to mankind. Naruto reminded him so much of him, and yet at the same time didn't. Sandaime was well aware of how hard the poor boy's life had been in the village, and he had done everything possible to make it easier for him. But alas, he could hardly force people to like him. And he had been outvoted by the Shinobi Council from taking Naruto into his own diminished clan. If he did it for one orphan, then it set a dangerous precedent for all others. So, regrettably, the boy had been left at the mercies of the orphanages. That's not so say that Hiruzen hadn't kept an eye on the boy. And until last week, there had been no concern from the boy about his danger. After Kakashi's report, however, he reminded himself to summon his errant former student. Although the spy network was very important for Konoha, so was this. But the grinning boy looked to be in good spirits. So that was well. Well, Kakashi, you're here for a mission, I suppose. Hi, Okasama, the man answered, not putting down the book that got him and so many other men in trouble with the ladies. Well, that's what we got here. Hiruzen pretended to sift through the numerous scrolls on his desk, knowing that Naruto's patience was running thin, but enjoying it too much. Another puff of smoke, and Naruto was just about ready to snatch that damn pipe out of his mouth. It annoyed him almost as much as Kakashi's damn book. Joe, hee, what's the deal? Naruto tapped his foot impatiently. Mama, Naruto. Have some patience, said Kakashi, knowing it was a lost cause. Naruto, however, already knew that. Tobirama had expounded greatly on the usefulness of patience. This one, I think, the Sandaime gave the scroll to Kakashi, who took it without bothering to look at it. Before Naruto could ask what it was, just as he had no doubt both Sakura and Sasuke wanted to, the Hokage said, "Be sure to be back for more." And just like that, he knew this was another D-rank. And sure enough, they were stuck sifting trash from a nearby river for more than 5 hours. Naruto was just glad that they didn't have to find Tora, the demon cat. He was certain that the cat took vicious, sadistic pleasure in scratching his face off every time. Oh, how he longed to kill it. Ugh, Naruto, no baka. We could have been done so much earlier if you had used your shadow clones, Sakura said, not for the first time as they walked back towards the administrative buildings. Sasuke added helpfully, and immediately Sakura was glad to see that her crush agreed with her. Why the hell should I do that, Sakura-chan? Naruto asked, both his hands behind his head. What the? He didn't understand Sakura's confused look before it was turned into one of anger. Why? Because it would have taken us less time. And it's teamwork, baka. Gomen, Sakura-chan. But no, Naruto replied, and missed her dumbfounded expression and Sasuke's momentary frown as he turned to Kakashi-sensei, hopefully. As usual, the glares accompanied wherever he went, and they collected their pay from the mission center, where they collected scrolls of completed missions. Kakashi-sensei. Naruto looked up at him hopefully. Can you teach me something new? Please. Sorry, Naruto, but you need to focus on the basics, came his teacher's usual reply, and one that Naruto had been expecting. But, before Naruto could plead further, he knew there was another team coming down from the Hokage's tower. Hello, Kakashi, asked the beautiful sensei, and his own teacher replied, without putting down his book. Joe. Naruto didn't need to be a genius to know when to stay away from women, and this was it. Instead, he looked toward her Jinin and pushed down the feelings of resentment that came up at the sight of the brash Inuzuka. What are you looking at, dope? Kiba asked, and was immediately admonished by his sensei, who seemed to have finished her brief conversation with Kakashi. Nothing, just seeing why anyone have to suffer your stench, dog breath, Naruto replied, knowing that it would set him off. And like clockwork, he nearly exploded. Why you dead last? I would beat your ass here and now, but we have a mission to get to. Che, like you can, Naruto replied, grinning, and just when he was getting ready to defend against the about-to-lunge Kiba, both of them were pulled away by their respective teammates, Naruto by Sakura and Kiba by Shino. Naruto briefly saw the indigo hair of Hinata and turned to see her face, but she immediately ducked her head. Ah, so she didn't even want to look at him. Of course. She no doubt thought that he shouldn't even get into an argument with someone as strong as Kiba. But that's exactly why he needed to. And Naruto-kun, he thought he heard her say as they were about to part, but it must have been his imagination. He turned towards Sakura and grinned. Nah, Sakura-chan. What is it, Naruto? The girl almost growled at him, already having his neck in her grasp. Since we're done with the mission, how we get something to eat, he said, smiling up at her. Shut up, Baka! Another punch to the head followed his request. But he felt it was worth it. He didn't want to look into the pale, light lavender eyes of the girl who he thought was his friend. A shinobi knows when to unleash his fury and when to hold back. Patience can be a weapon if you know how to use it, and anger can make you stronger if you know how to control it, Tobirama-sama had stated. And Naruto was angry at his treatment by the villagers, by the people who were supposed to be his friends and his teammates, his sensei, and he was learning to be patient. He might not have learned a new jutsu in the 2 days since he had been given the book by the old man, but he had improved, and maybe he was one step closer to being called a ninja in Zabuza's book. Something's wrong with Naruto-kun was Hinata's first thought as she came face to face with Team 7. Her heart had started beating much faster when Kiba had excitedly informed them that Team 7 was in the building, just 1 floor down. His nose really was improving at an incredible rate. But that wasn't surprising for an Inuzuka. They might not be one of the noble clans of Konoha, but they were extremely loyal. That was no hidden secret. Neither was that it is in the Inuzuka's blood the need to assert their dominance in a group, to establish themselves as the alpha. And that Kiba was the alpha of their team, of that there was no doubt. After Kurenai-sensei, of course. Shino, who rarely said anything from behind his hood and sunglasses, did not challenge Kiba's assumption of the team leader position. Only on occasions when Kiba was being especially silly, rather like one adorable, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, orange-wearing ninja they all knew, did Shino reprimand him. Kiba, much like the rest of his clan members, was very adept at nintaijutsu. She regretted to say that Kiba was better than her, who should have been the taijutsu specialist in their team, given the clan she belonged to. However, in contrast to Kiba's similarity to his powerful mother and sister, Hinata was nothing like the rest of her clan. The Hyuga were a clan of powerful shinobi who focused on their deadly taijutsu with the help of their revered dojutsu, the Byakugan. They boasted a large number of strong ninja and equally strong, albeit obedient, kunoichi. The only one she remembered being similar to was her mother, but she had passed away a few years ago, leaving both Hinata and Hanabi alone to face their father who grows colder each year. Personally, the indigo-haired kunoichi thought that Hayashi Hyuga, the cold, emotionless head of the Hyuga clan, had loved her mother very much, and that it was her death that had made her father retreat into his own world. Each year, he became even more distant than the last. Ever since she could remember, she was fighting for her father's attention, which was easily bestowed when her mother was alive and when he had been training her. But after her mother's death, Hinata had stopped progressing, prompting her father to give on training her personally. He was the epitome of what her clan signifies as a man, a leader, and as a shinobi. And she wanted more than anything to be able to make her father and clan proud of her. But no matter what she tried, it just wasn't good enough. She just wasn't as brutal as they wanted her to be. It was no secret to Hinata that her father hated her weakness, her gentle nature. But at least he doesn't say it any more as frequently. The elders, however, had no such considerations. It was clear that they all wanted her younger sister, Hanabi, who already showed much more promise, to succeed as the heiress to the clan. But there was no way they could make her the heiress until Hinata was at least 18. She remembered the first mock battle they had had in the courtyard with much of the clan present. Hanabi, for years younger than her, had been able to beat Hinata. It was those cold, emotionless, disapproving eyes of her father that she couldn't stand and had run away from the clan compound, not wanting to show him her tears and cement his opinion of her weakness even further. She remembered it like it was yesterday. But even if she could go back in time, she would not change the outcome of the battle. For that was the first time she had ever met Naruto. Hinata ran with her head bent down and hot tears streaming down her face, heedless of where she was going. But she just needed to get away from the stifling compound. She knew that someone was sent after her. After all, they couldn't just let the heiress outside with no protecting, her Byakugan being unsealed as it was. Bang! A loud curse emanated from someone in front of her. She had crashed right into an older boy who looked at his fallen ice cream and then to her, hatefully. "Hey you!" the black-haired boy yelled, pointing at her. "Gee, Gomen," Hinata stuttered. "People from noble families act like they're so stuck up," spat his friend, who was even larger than the first boy. Scared as she was, and not knowing what to do, Hinata squeaked another apology and made to bolt. "Wait, you brat!" The first boy grabbed her hair painfully and pulled her back. Ag! She was pushed to the ground. The three circled her and bent her head, tears having resumed. "Come on, apologize," they yelled at her. "Gomenasai. Gee, Gomenasai." Ag! Hinata was pulled up by the first boy, who glared hatefully. "Don't look at me with those eyes. Freak," he scorned. "She must be a Hyuga," the other one added. "If you're a Hyuga, show us your Byakugan. Yay. Otherwise, don't look at us with those creepy eyes. I bet you're just a monster." "Yeah, a Byakugan monster," the civilian boys laughed, all taunting her. There was no one to save her from them. She was stuck, a useless Hyuga girl with a weak Byakugan who couldn't even defend herself against civilians. Her father would be even more ashamed of her when he found out. If only she could get away. Then no one would know. "Hey, quit it." Hinata was afraid she might just have passed out, for surely no one would have come to her rescue. But no, she was still awake, and this was really happening. With her tear-filled eyes, she looked at the boy standing opposite them, dressed in the brightest orange t-shirt she had ever seen and green goggles on his forehead. If the situation wasn't so dire, she might have giggled at the comical appearance. But as it was, she had no intention of laughing at him, even if he wasn't attempting to save her. There was just something in the boy's eyes that told her that he might be a kindred soul, that he might understand her pain. "Who are you, brat?" the kid whose ice cream she had spilled asked. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki, the future Hokage. Don't you forget it," the boy exclaimed. Hinata had to admit the boy had guts. He was much braver than she could ever be, and she instantly admired his courage. The three bullies, though, laughed in his face, taunting his dream. "What an idiot," they scorned at him, earning her glare at their back. Not that they knew or cared. How dare they make fun of his dream? She, of all people, knew the pain of striving for something when everyone was against you. "Oh yeah, I'll show you." The boy, Naruto, brought his hands together in a seal, and Hinata felt a buildup of chakra. "Clone jutsu," he yelled. Momentarily, the civilian boys were taken aback, thinking they had confronted a genin perhaps. But what resulted from his jutsu were tiny clones glaring up the three bullies, squeaking challenges, and the three burst into laughter once more. Naruto stared hopelessly at the clones, but before she could warn him, one of the boys had surged forward and punched in the nose. What resulted was a beating, and even while squeaked for them to stop, they paid no mind. "Stop!" she yelled, as loud as she could get her voice, hoping that would attract some adult attention. She had to stop his beating. She was powerless to help him, feeling even more of a failure. Finally, after having ruined his red scarf, the three took off as they heard her bodyguard's approaching voice calling for her. Hinata went forward where Naruto crouched. Are you okay?" she asked, and he looked up with the most striking, startling blue eyes she had ever seen. It was like he held an ocean of emotion in them. "Yeah, I'm used to it," he murmured depressingly, waving it off as if it was a common occurrence. And that made her feel even once. She had been the source of this latest addition to her beating. It was bad enough that she was getting beat up at home in spars with her cousin and younger sister, but now her weakness was causing others to get hurt too. That was the day she swore she would get stronger. For the boy who had tried to help her. For the one child who had shown her kindness when no one else would. Sir. Hinata attempted to say before she was pulled back. Hinata-sama, I've been looking for you, Ko said, pulling her with him and throwing a glare at Naruto, who didn't look at all surprised. You shouldn't associate with him, Hinata-sama, the demon brat. But, Ko-san, she attempted to pull out of his grip, but yet again failed. Hinata was shocked that Ko, who was normally so kind, would say something like that. Was the boy dangerous? He didn't look like he was. But before she could say something else to him, Ko had increased his pulling efforts. The last thing she saw were the blue eyes, swimming with tears before a grin erupted on his cute whiskered face, and the boy took off running. Her heart beat even faster as they neared Team 7. Hinata didn't know what to feel. A part of her wanted to talk to him. Another screamed for Kurinai-sensei to not talk to her friend here, so they could leave. As usual, Kiba and Naruto got into an argument. Even though she thought it a bit silly that they were trying to one-up the other, Naruto did look cute getting all riled up like that. But they shouldn't be so antagonistic towards each other. They were comrades after all. Hinata could feel her face reddening at the how close Naruto-kun was standing. That was she afraid Kiba would hear her thumping heart, if she didn't pass out before that. It was Naruto who kept her going even against the sometimes overwhelming negative pressure from her family. Naruto, who got beaten down so many times in the academy for his poor shinobi skills but never failed to get back up. Naruto, who she had followed many times, at a distance of course, so as to not get caught, and watched him beat himself bloody and collapse by training until his body could take it no more. It was he who had been kind to her before she had even met her team. He who had tried to save her from those bullies all those years ago and had gotten beat up himself. Nobody had stood up for her when the villagers and other children made fun of her white eyes. It was only him who had tried to help a helpless, foolish young girl he didn't even know. It was him who didn't care that the bullies had torn up his scarf that was obviously very important to him, and instead was concerned about her. After her mother's death, he had been the first kindness she had experienced, and with expecting no reward. He hadn't even known who she was. Even to this day, she felt guilty for leaving when her bodyguard pulled her away from Naruto and listening to him when the poor boy was still clutching his bleeding nose. But the kind boy had never brought it up, and there had been so many times Hinata had wanted to thank him for it, but never found the courage to do so in the academy. She was always watching from afar, too scared to know what he would say, too scared for him to think of her just as everybody else did. But then that had all changed when she and Naruto had trained together in Wave. Tree climbing was easier for her after all. She was a Hyuga, and as such had nearly perfect chakra control. Still, she had been beaten by Sakura, who was the one who got the exercise the fastest. Hinata had thought that she and Naruto might even become friends, as outlandish and fantasy as the idea used to be before. And every time she wanted to give up and fall down, his determined, happy blue eyes brought her back up. But she was a failure. She just had to go and screw it up like she did everything. Naruto had barely spoken 2 sentences to her or to anyone else on the way back from Wave. But then again, he was hurting over the death of his even if he hadn't known Haku for long. She wanted more than anything to be able to comfort him, seeing him hurting. But again, she was too scared. Always afraid. He turned towards her, and she instantly looked down to the floor, face heating up as she remembered the words she had spoken to him 2 weeks ago. She had foolishly compared his strength against Kiba's skill, who also eclipsed herself. But that wasn't a surprise. She doubted there was anyone who couldn't beat her. Hinata reached within her jacket, her hand clutching something shiny and metal. She tried to summon up the courage to get his attention, stuttering and cursing herself for it. Utoken. But he had already turned his head in those striking blue orbs to the girl holding his neck in a death grip and asked her out on a date, yet again. Hinata felt her heart sink. Of course, he would never look at her like the way he does at Sakura. Look at her. Sakura was beautiful. She had lovely pink hair, matching outfit, had excellent chakra control from what Kurenai-sensei had remarked on their tree climbing training. And Sakura wasn't afraid. Not as much as her anyway. When the Hunter Nin had showed up on the bridge and looked at them with that scary, slick Kirinin mask, her legs hadn't trembled like Hinata's had done. It was no wonder Naruto-kun was attracted to Sakura. Who wouldn't be? Her eyes briefly caught the obsidian, piercing ones of Sasuke Uchiha before she looked down and hurriedly followed her sensei, away from Team 7. But even as her team walked away from them, Hinata couldn't help but be troubled over what she had seen. It was but a moment, but she had seen the look in his eyes. For a brief second, she was taken back to the moment where he was crouched to the ground, clutching his bleeding nose, and his eyes had looked just the same. Just as defeated, just as sad. The thought broke her heart more than she could put into words. She would never fail to recognize the look, for she had seen it too many times in the mirror. Naruto-kun was hurting. Something was wrong with Naruto-kun, and the thought troubled her deeply, even more so that she didn't know what it was. Hinata-chan, you okay? She turned to see Kiba and Akamaru looking over her concernedly. Could they have smelled her concern? Was that possible? Hastily, she nodded her head. Why yes, Kiba-kun. Just thinking about the mission. She supposed it could pass off as the truth. For this particular mission anyway. I don't sweat it. There's no way that demon cat is getting away from us this time. He grinned and looked much like Akamaru did when the pup was happy. The thought made her giggle and pulled her out of her troubled thoughts for the moment. But soon enough, they had caught Tora the demon cat again, which was getting much easier now that they had some experience in tracking. Unlike most Genin teams, Team 8 actually looked forward to tracking missions. Their team was designed to be specialized tracking unit, with all 3 Genin having specialized jutsu. The Aburame with their Hijitsu using their Kikaichu bugs, the Inuzuka with their well-developed and highly sensitive sense of smell and hearing, and the Hyuga with their Byakugan. It was just a shame, Hinata thought, that their team was held back by her incompetence. But it's not like she was that way on purpose. Her Byakugan was just as pure as the rest of her clan members. No one had married into the clan in nearly 50 years. And it wasn't like the problem was in her eyes. It was in her mastery of Jukin, also called Gentle Fist, which was the Hyuga's secret taijutsu style. Unlike other styles, the Hyuga didn't rely on brute force to inflict damage. The damage they inflicted was much more subtle and much more devastating, if executed properly. When the teams were formed, their sensei, Kurenai, had told them of her belief they had the potential to be one of the best hunter teams in Konoha. And it was Hinata's wish as well, to be a powerful ninja for Konoha that her father and her clan could be proud of, rather than the weakling she currently was. Unlike other hidden villages, Konoha had no proper Hunter Nin unit. Although Haku turned out to be fake, he did have a real mask, taken no doubt from the Hunter Nin he had killed. They were tasked with hunting down rogue ninja from their village, and with keeping their village's secrets. A ninja's body, even if the person was no longer alive, still held many secrets, clan or otherwise, that the village doesn't want getting out. For in their world, secrets and secret techniques, especially Kekagenkai, like the Byakugan, meant power. A Hunter Nin was tasked with either bringing back the rogue Nin or eliminating them and disposing off the body on the scene. Hinata didn't think she had the stomach for such work, but her sensei was certain she had the potential to be a good Hunter Nin, and she didn't want to let Kurenai down. Hinata stole a glance at the woman walking in front of them. A Kunoichi from the Yuhi clan, she was one of the village's only 3 Genjutsu mistresses. And at 27, she struck an amazing figure. To Hinata, the older woman was nothing short of inspirational. Hinata had been introduced to her sensei when she was 8, when her father had given up on Hinata's training himself. She knew her father had faced much opposition from the clan when he had entered Hinata for the academy, because even though she wasn't as strong as the clan wished her to be, she was still the heiress, a position that had a lot of influence in Fire Country and Genin, and in time, Chunin missions carried a high risk of death, or much worse. After the Uchiha massacre, The Hyuga clan had filled in the power vacuum that had been left and taken over as the most influential clan within the village. As such, it was essential that their heiress be strong to be able to lead the clan. Hinata, however, didn't fit the mold. She was too much like her mother. She knew it, and she knew the elders knew it too. But she would not give up. She would die before she gave up without even trying. She would try her best to grow stronger in the few years she had available to her. She would fight for her place within the clan, and she would show them that she was a Hyuga. And if there was anything she had learned from watching Naruto coins secretly, it was to never give up. More than her father, more than her mother, more than even Kurenai-sensei, he was her inspiration. She longed to see respect for her skills in those azure orbs that she imagined before going to bed every night. Naruto, Kakashi sighed. You need to focus on the basics. And your chakra control is still lacking. I can't teach you anything until you improve on those. Naruto looked from the usual bored expression of his sensei, his book still in front of him. Once again, he had asked Kakashi-sensei to train him, and once again, the man had declined it. It really should be no surprise to him by this point. But something about Kakashi told him that he was indeed impatient to go somewhere. Naruto didn't know how he knew, but he did. A look to the right, and Naruto saw Sasuke walking away, with Sakura trailing behind him, no doubt asking for a date or train with him. He didn't know why she bothered. On that note, he didn't know why he bothered with her anymore, or with any of his teammates in fact, including the sensei. Still, he thought he might give one more try. If that didn't work, then Naruto would have no choice but sneak into the library or ask Jiji. Or better yet, go look for that old man who had given him Tobirama-sama's book. Maybe he could persuade him to give some pointers. Kakashi was just about to turn around and leave when Naruto's next question stopped him short. How do I do that? Naruto asked, looking at him with those big blue eyes that reminded him so much of him, and yet there was also something that didn't. It was beyond confusing to the copy ninja. Naruto had never, ever showed an eagerness to practice the basics. Something was going on here. Shocked, he looked back, but of course it didn't show on his face other than the raising of his eyebrow. Truthfully, Naruto wasn't that bad a student. Yes, he got on Kakashi's nerves sometimes. Okay, almost all the time. And his basics were beyond pathetic, his taijutsu was horrendous, and his chakra control was shoddy at best. But he liked the kid most of the time, and it had nothing to do with his heritage. Okay, maybe that was a part of it. Inwardly, he shook his head. All of this could have been avoided if he had just been allowed to take care of Naruto from an earlier age. The boy was beyond competitive, almost to an obsessive degree. It was perhaps the only thing that Naruto had in common with the Uchiha prodigy. And from the look Naruto had thrown towards Sasuke when the boy had walked away, Kakashi knew that this question and the intent behind it stemmed from a need to beat the Uchiha, as seemingly impossible as it was. He shook his head. If you're doing it to beat Sasuke, Naruto, then No. Naruto shook his vehemently. He saw the Kakashi's lone eye look at him as if knowing he was lying. But he really wasn't. For the most part. Okay, maybe I do want to beat the team, but I also want to grow stronger and... Kakashi shook his head at the blonde genin again. No. Naruto, until you realize what you're training for, I will not teach you anything new. Besides, you need to improve upon the basics. No. Team 7 already had one Avenger, and they didn't need two Sasukes running around. One was more than enough. He really needed to put an end to this in-team competitiveness. It was amusing at first, but now it was obvious that Sasuke's superior skill and Naruto's lack of it was sending their already shoddy teamwork down the drain. The loudmouth blonde needed to realize that he would need to get stronger for a reason other than a need to defeat Sasuke. Naruto bristled at the blunt put down and rejection. But that was what he was asking. How to improve on his basics. That's what I'm asking, Baka-sensei. Naruto spat angrily, momentarily surprising Kakashi with his outburst. Tell me exercises that I can use to improve my chakra control. Kakashi lowered his book and looked at his genin's rapidly rising and falling chest and his heated eyes. Perhaps he could just tell him something. After all, it would take a long time to even catch up to Sasuke, and he would need to start soon. But he couldn't fight the feeling that this might set the team back even further rather than improve their teamwork, which is what Kakashi wanted. He could hardly refuse to teach his own student even the basics. Kakashi sighed. You can climb trees now, but honestly, I wouldn't have had you do the exercise. It was necessary, but you need something more basic than that. Naruto glared at his lazy sensei and his blatant disrespect of his skills, but decided to hold his tongue. For now, he would listen to what he had to say. Take a leaf. Kakashi picked up a leaf from the ground and put it on his forehead. The goal is to first stick the leaf to your forehead using chakra, much like tree walking, and then float it on your forehead and not letting it fall. As Naruto looked down on the leaf, but how do I? He sighed, looking at the empty space in front of him. There was no use. His useless sensei was already gone. Oh, how he wanted to get so good that he could rub it in Kakashibaka's face. How he wanted to see the look of disbelief of Sasuke team's face when he realizes that Naruto had surpassed him. Ugh, why do I even bother? Naruto yelled to the empty air, but then took a deep breath. He needed a calm head if he was to figure out how in the hell he was going to go about getting stronger. Reading books was well and all, but it was not going to help him increase his skills. That much was certain. As he walked towards an empty training ground, Naruto skipped the usual street and took to the roofs. He needed a cool head, and he was not going to get it by having to ignore the villagers' disdainful looks. Okay, so Kakashi said that he needed to stick it to his forehead using chakra. When he had accomplished that, he needed to float it. Shadow, clone jutsu, Naruto called out, raising his fingers in the now very familiar cross-shaped seal. Two clones popped up out of the smoke, and Naruto narrowed his eyes, sighing. He had only wanted one. This was nothing but a waste of chakra. Okay, why don't you go to the flat and grab any scroll you can find on chakra theory and chakra control? He pointed to the one on the right, and it took with a salute. Naruto turned towards the other one and instantly got a mischievous idea. Ugh, how am I so stupid? Naruto hit himself on the head. What is it, boss? The clone asked, not looking at all concerned with the boss' self-reprimand. Nothing, Naruto grumbled. He really needed to start thinking things through like the old had told him. Henjin to someone else, he ordered. Puzzled, the clone complied, and soon he had gotten the shape of some nondescript ninja Naruto might have seen in the village. You will take a pen and paper and sneak into Team's house and spy on him training. And make notes, Naruto ordered. He had always wondered where Sasuke got all those fancy moves that he used in his spars against him and Kakashi. He had never seen Kakashi teach Sasuke those, so he must be getting them from somewhere. Cool, boss. The clone saluted and was about to take off when Naruto stopped it. Don't get caught. Fortunately, the clone had more than enough experience sneaking and hiding that this mission would be a piece of cake. Little did Naruto know, this action of his was observed by someone who had less than stellar intentions. Although, at this moment, the move had been enough to impress him. With that done, Naruto made his way towards his training ground and proceeded with the exercise that Kakashi had told him about. As soon as he supplied his chakra, the leaf went shooting up towards the sky in an instant. Sighing, he picked it up again and lessened the amount of chakra he was feeding it. It was nowhere near easy, but after more than an hour, Naruto had started getting the hang of it. It took a lot of curses and threats to the inanimate leaf, but finally Naruto had gotten the leaf to stick to his head. This was going to take too long. If one bloody leaf took an hour, then he would have no time left for other training. Why couldn't he just get his clones to do it with him? He stopped short in shock. Ugh. His new habit of trying to analyze things was finally coming in handy when he hit himself over the head again. So fucking stupid. He had been using shadow clones to do everything for him. Everything from using them in fights, to making them to the dishes, clean the house, or to go and get ramen from Ichiraku. There was no reason that he couldn't use them to train. Why had he never thought about this again? With this thought, another horde of clones was summoned. He had no idea how many there were, but suspected that there were around 50. "All of you, grab a leaf and get to it," he ordered them. "Yes, boss." A chorus of their yells rang through the training as none of them needed an explanation of what needed to be done. That merited more thought, but not right now. After half an hour of trying to master the lead exercise, Naruto's head snapped up in shock, yet again. What the hell was that? Why were there scrolls on his bed? Whose were they? He couldn't recognize the writing, but they were definitely on the topics that he had needed. Basic chakra theory and elementary chakra control were their titles. Now, he was beyond curious. How the hell had he known it? The clone seemed to have popped out of existence out of nowhere. It should have enough chakra, then why did it pop? Did someone destroy it? No use thinking about it now. He sent one of the clones to go to the apartment, investigate, and bring back the scrolls, carefully. This meant that whatever memories the clones experienced were sent back to the original. Why the fuck had he never noticed this in the first place? Was he really that dense, as others claimed him to be? He must be if he hadn't noticed such a crucial fact about his primary jutsu. Primary? Ki? Naruto laughed. He really didn't have any other jutsu. He would if Kakashi would just be less stubborn and teach him something too like he did with his precious Sasuke team. Naruto was under no illusions. Last night, he had sat down and reflected seriously on his own skills. And to say that he was disappointed was as obvious as saying the old man Gigi was a pervert. "Here you go, boss." The clone returned with the 2 scrolls that were on his bed, seemingly out of nowhere. Did Kakashi Baka leave these there? No, there was no way he would do something like that. Besides, he had once seen Kakashi's handwriting on a mission report, and it was nothing like this. This almost seemed, what was the word for it, clinical surgical. This is what he imagined an assassin's handwriting would look like it, and the thought was more than a little disturbing. But he had no reason to complain. As the other 49 clones trained to stick the leaf on their head, and then floating it, Naruto opened the first scroll and read through it. It detailed what chakra really was, its distribution of spiritual, physical, and natural chakra, which was everywhere in the surroundings, created and sustained by living beings, and not accessible except through extremely hard and dangerous training. It then went on to explain how the spiritual chakra was molded and manifested and used in jinjutsus or illusions. It was called in chakra. Physical chakra could be channeled into specific body parts or the whole body as a whole to strengthen the muscles, bones, cartilage, and to perform various functions. Channeling into the ears heightened one's hearing sensitivity, and the same with the nose for smelling. The extremes of chakra control were shown in the second scroll, ranging from the basic exercises as the ones he and his clones were attempting to the most difficult of all, controlling chakra from medical ninjutsu. That didn't interest him that much, to be honest. Granted, it would be cool to be able to heal himself or others in battle, but right now he needed to focus on the exercises more than jutsus. The scrolls didn't have jutsus anyway. All in all, he learned more about chakra theory and controlling chakra from the 2 admittedly quite lengthy scrolls than he had in 4 years in the academy. Granted, he had slept through most of the boring lectures that weren't going to help him get stronger and weren't flashy jutsu. If he could go back in time, he would use it to thoroughly kick his younger self in the ass to get his head on straight. How could he have been this stupid? But at least he was on the right track now. Done with the scrolls for now, Naruto carefully put them away under a tree's root and got up to do the training along with his clones. He had heard them grumbling about the unfairness of it all, and he agreed. He couldn't just sit and do nothing. Meanwhile, Naruto relegated one of his clones who had brought a pencil and some empty scrolls to jot down a draft of his possible training routines and what he needed to work on, staring from the very basics. More than 2 hours later, an incredibly tired but very self-satisfied Naruto laid down on the ground. True, he had expended a lot of chakra, was out of breath, and he could collapse anytime soon, but it had been worth it. Ugh, Naruto grumbled, standing up with some effort and grabbing his aching head. Never dismiss so many clones so quickly. He reminded himself. His head was killing him, with a headache that had resulted from his thoughtless action. But Naruto knew that his control had improved, even if by a little bit. Halfway through the training, he had gotten bored and taken to running up and down trees, at the same time as sticking the leaf to his forehead. That particular exercise was his own invention and wasn't in the scrolls, but it was more fun that way than just standing around, sticking a leaf to his head. True, it had taken him a lot of falls, bumps on the head, and aching limbs, but in the end, he had gotten the hang of it. He was nowhere near mastering it, but it was progress. As Naruto stumbled into his house and collapsed on his bed, exhausted, little did he know that his training session hadn't gone unobserved. Neither was the observer left unimpressed. The violent river crashed into wood and concrete of the unfinished bridge, but he didn't hear it. Gato's goons cheered like a psychopathic, bloodthirsty crowd, but he didn't hear it. His sensei yanked him back forcefully and told him to use his head, but he didn't hear it. Gato gloated, but he didn't hear it. All he could hear was the sounding of the blood rushing in his ears, the furious beating of his heart. Gato was standing a few feet away with his disgusting foot on Haku's face, with nearly 50 goons behind him. Yet he saw nothing. All he could see was red. All he could see was the demon standing in front of him. His fingers lengthened into claws. He clenched his fists so hard that his claws dug into his palm and drew hot blood. Yet he didn't feel the pain or the trickle of the precious life water. All he felt was the unwavering hate. Hate, not directed at the man who tried to kill his client, that ugly son of a bitch who stomped on Haku's dead body like he was a rat. No, his hate was made more potent because it was directed at the man standing before him, who called himself a shinobi. You don't understand the way of the shinobi. I merely used him just as Gato used me. Now it's over. His usefulness is at an end. The loss of his strength and skill. Yes, that means something to me. But the boy, nothing, said Zabuza's gruff voice. Naruto's rage increased as he growled at the demon of the mist. His chakra riled up in response, almost eager, begging to be let out. Like a beast, caged and enraged, howling to be let loose. If you really think that, then you're an even bigger rat than I thought. Kakashi put a hand on his shoulder, yet he didn't feel it. All he wanted to feel at the moment was the blood of Zabuza on his hands instead of his own. Okay, calm down. He's not the enemy, said Kakashi, trying to hold him back from doing something stupid. Angrily, he shrugged the sensei's hand off. Shut up. As far as I'm concerned, he's enemy number one. Naruto pointed his finger at Zabuza. How could you? You ungrateful, another growl. After everything he did for you, Haku lived for you. Haku's young, innocent-like face swam in front of his eyes. You were the most important person to him. Did he mean nothing to you? The way of shinobi is very difficult for me. Haku smiled in his memory. While he was sacrificing everything for you, you never felt anything for him. Naruto waved his hand furiously, his eyes filling up with tears. But I will do anything to see his dream fulfilled. Even become a shinobi. Haku's voice took on a determined, hardened tone, so very different from the soft-spoken boy he had met. And if I become stronger, his voice quivered for but a moment, does that mean I will become as cold-hearted as you are? An emotionless killer. Lightning had flashed. Naruto had screamed for him to stop. But neither Haku nor Kakashi had listened. Lightning pierced the boy's chest, and Haku's life faded from his eyes. He threw his life away. And for what? For you and your pathetic dream? Naruto shook his head, willing the tears to not cloud his vision anymore. To not be there anymore, so he could glare death at the seemingly impossible to kill man. You never let him have a dream of his own, but he didn't care. And you toss him aside like he's nothing, like a broken tool. Man, that's so wrong. So wrong. Naruto yelled, furiously rubbing his eyes. You talk too much. Zabuza growled, ripping his bandages away from his mouth with his sharp, pointed teeth. He finally turned to glare at Naruto, but it fell short, for the piercing eyes were wet. Your words cut deep, deeper than any blade. But don't you dare diminish his sacrifice with your pathetic weakness and childish crying. What? His sacrifice. Enraged, Naruto opened his mouth to yell at the infernal, selfish man again, but he was cut short. Haku was a shinobi of Kirigakure. He deserves respect, not tears of a naive child. He died a shinobi's death. The demon of the hidden mist yelled, and he suddenly somehow had a kunai in his mouth. Don't avert your eyes, kid, or you will never be a shinobi. Zabuza growled through the kunai in his mouth and charged headfirst into battle, facing a horde of 50 mercenaries. Hands and arms useless, Zabuza swung and dodged, and he slashed and got slashed. He stabbed and he got stabbed. Zabuza released a howl of fury, dark purple chakra bursting out of his battered, slashed, and cut body, with swords sticking out at odd angles, giving him the strength to finish his self-imposed mission. What followed could only be called a slaughter of mortals by a demon, and at the end, Gato's head rolled of his stunted, fat body. Zabuza crashed to his knees amongst the sea of dead killers and rapists, but not fallen, merely injured. Uzumaki, the demon wheezed. Come here. Kakashi tried to hold him back, but Naruto obliged the injured man. Looking down at the bloodied face, his watery blue eyes staring into the black beady ones of his one-time enemy. Closer. Naruto obeyed. Promise me, Sakuras will not be in vain. The Mizukage will die. The demon coughed up blood, hanging on to unconsciousness or maybe his life through sheer will. Shocked at what he had just seen, stunned at the truth that Haku was a ninja of Kiri and awed by Zabuza's skill, Naruto could only nod his acquiescence. The last thing Naruto saw were the black, peaceful eyes as he buried the kunai to the hilt in the injured demon's chest. Hug! Naruto awoke with a start, hyperventilating and unable to breathe, heart racing like a racehorse, his t-shirt slick with sweat and sticking to his chest, his bed sheets soaked. He lay there for a few minutes, trying desperately to calm his furiously beating heart. That nightmare again. It has haunted him every day since that day on the bridge. It never went away, no matter how much Naruto tried to chase away his demons. It seems that Zabuza's eyes were always there, watching him, judging him, and finding him unworthy. Strangely at peace with death when they should be panicked, glad when they should be morose. Naruto turned his head to the side to look at his alarm clock. It was just past 5 and faint traces of dawn's early light could be seen in the sky, coming through his cracked glass window. He knew, just like every other night, trying to sleep some more now would be useless. Now that he had calmed somewhat, Naruto, with some monumental effort, scrambled out of bed to do his morning rituals and leave for training. After course, eating a large helping of eggs and grilled sausages for breakfast. While the villagers actively shunned and avoided him, the civilian merchants take it one step further by always giving him rotten or out-of-date produce, and often at 3 times the price. But, again evidence of his earlier stupidity, it had taken him all these years to figure out that he could fool those shopkeepers by simply Henji into a civilian. But better late than never. As such, he was still the shortest in their group, due to his consistent malnutrition. But now he was making an effort to eat a healthy diet, high in proteins, moderate carbs, and low fat. Yes, he knew what those were now. It hadn't taken much effort to get Nichin to explain it to him. She always liked to mother him. Haku's face swam in his mind. Do you have someone precious you want to protect? His seemingly innocent question had driven more sleep away from Naruto than Zabuza, even before the Battle of the Bridge. Precious people? What a ridiculous question. He had no precious people. This damn, hateful village wouldn't let him. At first, he thought it was his teammates, but they had proven themselves to not be. Sakura had even said that she hated Naruto in their introduction to Kakashi. And then he had thought maybe Hinata could be it. But she hadn't supported him. No, she had supported that ass Kiba. Didn't she see how hard he was trying to better himself? Didn't she see that he trained until he collapsed just to get that damn dead last label off of him? But no, she hadn't seen it. She hadn't even considered it. Most probably because she was a precious, high and mighty Hyuga princess. Of course, a no-clan orphan like himself would be beneath her notice. Why did he even think he could be friends with her in the first place? Precious people. Ki. Naruto threw the fork down in frustration at his plate, scattering his eggs and smashing his face. Protein. And it was like a light bulb went on in his head, turning the hate churning inside him into some semblance of hope, unknowingly making a beast growl in frustration. I am. Yes, he could protect her. The teenage civilian girl, who after closing her modest ramen stand for the night, used to feed a hungry young boy for free, even though she and her father couldn't really afford it. And Tucci-san, who served him even though it probably drove customers away. And Irika, even with his meager academy instructor salary, always tried to make sure he had enough groceries during his 4 years in the academy. Yes, they were his precious people. In a village of thousands, he only had 3. But that's enough, he supposed. Much better than the hordes who adore the team without even knowing him. He would take those 3 over the hundreds any day. Because while he had no friends, he did have those he cared for. And he would get stronger to protect them. Once again, pulling himself from his dark thoughts, he hurriedly finished his breakfast. No sense in wasting time. Naruto set out to do battle with another day of training, at least before he was to meet up with his team for a mission. His route took him to the outskirts of the village, through the residential section and past the clan compounds. However, the blonde hadn't even made it halfway to Training Ground 15, the one furthest away from the center of the village, when he noticed a most peculiar sight. All of the training grounds were empty. However, one of them only had 2 people in it. And from what he could see, they looked to be clones of each, except one of them was much younger. Neither paid any attention to him, as it was obvious. They were racing each other the length of the ground, which was substantial. Once they reached what was their marked finishing line, Naruto thought they would take a break. However, much to his surprise, not only did they not continue sprinting back towards the starting line, they sped up much more. More to his shock, however, was the sight that greeted him when the 2 came here. In all of his short years, Naruto could safely say that he hadn't seen anything so horrifying. Not only were the eyebrows of both the clones looked like bushes with their own life, they were dressed in green leotards that stuck rather disturbingly to their bodies. Not to mention their similar bowl-cut hair. And the sweat they had accumulated did nothing to hide the outlines of parts that Naruto never wished to see of another man and that of his younger clone. This was beyond disturbing. But he had noticed that both of them were wearing their leaf headband and cursed himself yet again for losing his. "Aha!" the older green one exclaimed. "Who do we have here?" Naruto was stunned by the pearly white teeth for a moment before he realized that he should probably answer, lest these 2 think he was spying on them. I was just on my way to train. Sorry, I didn't mean to intrude. I am Naruto Uzumaki Kropka. Oh, it's always a pleasure to see someone stroke their flames of youth so passionately as to get up to train so early. The older one grinned, and the younger seemed to be taking notes on a notepad. Weirded out enough by the duo, Naruto did not even want to think about where he could have hidden it, since the suit didn't seem to have any pockets. Just when Naruto thought he was done with this, the man struck up a pose, pointing at himself with a wink and said, "I'm my guy, Konoha's sublime green beast of prey." He then motioned to who could easily be his son, and Naruto instantly felt sorry for the boy. "And this is my student, the very handsome Rock Lee." Naruto nodded, now understanding the matching outfits, the haircuts, and the eyebrow. They were insane, both of them, but he wasn't blind to a part of him that felt jealous of this boy. "Pleased to meet you." The younger one, Rock Lee, surged forward and grabbed Naruto's hand that he hadn't offered and shook it vigorously. It is great to see someone get up to train so early. The boy was so excited that Naruto didn't want to ruin it by telling him that it wasn't by choice. He just couldn't sleep, but then a thought occurred to him. Kakashi didn't seem like he wanted to train Naruto anytime soon. Yes, he could do the basics, but given his sabotaged education, There was no point in practicing something that was already flawed. And he knew he could hardly get better by training himself. He needed a trainer. That was certain. The mysterious scrolls which had turned up on his bed didn't count. Even the Yondaime and the Sandaime didn't get so strong by training themselves. They had help from their senseis. "It looks like you were training for conditioning and stamina," he asked. Rockley nodded. "We sure are. We do this every morning. This is our cardio workout. Do you mind if I join you? I also need to work on my stamina. I won't be a bother, I promise," he asked the sensei more than the boy, almost certain he would be denied. The boy turned to watch his sensei's serious face, who stared at Naruto as if deciphering a puzzle, making him increasingly nervous. He really didn't like that look, especially on someone like Guy. "Well, of course you can, but only if you drop down now and give me 100 push-ups." Guy grinned, giving him what Naruto supposed to be a nice guy pose and a thumbs up. That caught Naruto by surprise. He really hadn't been expecting a test, but he really should have. Even Kakashi had tested them before allowing them to be his genin. Granted, the insufferably lazy Jounin hadn't taught him much, if anything, since then. But that's beside the point. So, Guy wasn't being unrealistic, even though 100 push-ups in one go seemed a bit much. Naruto nodded, "Of course, Guy-sensei," and put his bag down on the grass. "YSH." Lee punched the air enthusiastically. "I shall join you, my youthful comrade, in this youthful endeavor." "Well done, Lee. Just what I expect from my student. Let us show the world that we are burning with the passionate flames of youth." Okay, maybe he had made a mistake in asking to join them. But too late now. Damn, the ground was cold. But no way in hell was he going to show weakness to this weird duo, especially now that the boy was going to be doing the same exercise. So, ignoring the freezing grass, Naruto dropped down in what he thought was the proper form, immediately eliciting a grunt of disapproval from the sensei. "Clearly, my youthful young friend, you need my advice desperately," Guy exclaimed, shocked at seeing a ninja who didn't know what the right form of push-up was. Granted, most of those girls who called themselves kunoichi didn't either, but he wasn't one of them. "Put your hands almost under your shoulders, shoulder-width apart, back and legs straight. When you go down, go all the way until your chest hits the floor, stay for a second, contract your chest muscles, and then push back up until your arms are straight. And then continue pushing until you're almost on your fingers. And then repeat." Guy quickly summarized the instructions as Naruto watched Lee do the demonstration, slowly as if Naruto was mentally challenged, which the blonde genin was actually glad for this time. As soon as he had done one, using the proper method, not the bullshit that his academy instructors had taught him, he realized it was actually quite hard, and to do 100 would be a challenge. Grinning, Naruto got to work, aching already when he got a 20. "Come on, don't stop," Guy cheered, "and no cheating with chakra like my eternal rival." Naruto wasn't really paying attention to what the sensei meant by cheating with chakra or who this eternal rival was. He was more concerned with his straining muscles, begging to be let down at 30. "I can't. Too hard," Naruto growled, but the image of Zabuza calling him weak screamed into his mind. No, he would not back down. "Don't let yourself fall to the ground. When you want to rest, go in the plank position and continue when ready," Guy instructed, looking at the blonde genin really struggle to not crash at 50. But he could do it, Guy could tell. He could see that this boy wasn't unfamiliar with effort. More so, he knew the fire in those eyes. He had seen it in his own, his students, and his father's. And in that moment, Guy knew that this Naruto Uzumaki would rather die than give up. And he was right. About 20 minutes later, with several short breaks, Naruto had crashed into the grass, his arms, core, and his legs all screaming in protest. But his mind was racing. His face, though slick with sweat and almost heaving due to lack of breath, was alight with the glow of triumph. Yes, he would get better. Not today, not tomorrow, and maybe not even in the next year. But he would surpass the Uchiha even if his sensei didn't train him. And oh, that can't be true. No, it was lie. It had to be. Hinata felt like her legs were made of lead. She couldn't walk, nor could she think. Her young, naive mind couldn't comprehend the idea that she might not have her mother in the morning. Mothers were always supposed to be there, protecting and nurturing their young, teaching them and loving them, sometimes scolding them and watching them grow up. Why then did Auto-sama inform her of this horrendous betrayal? She was only 8. The little girl with the confidence problems couldn't bear the thought of being left alone in this world. Her mother couldn't betray her like that. She couldn't. She had promised. Hinata trudged, not paying attention to the tears streaming down her face, her pale, lavender eyes like wells of water, so unlike the rest of the unemotional orbs of the Hyuga. But then, she had always been different. The only one she was similar to lay in the bed in her parents' room. As young as she was, even she could understand the somber mood that had struck the entire compound as she dragged her feet. She should have been hurrying, she knew, but she couldn't get herself to face her. Chalking back on a hiccup, Hinata knocked on the sliding door lightly. Her mother was injured, but still a weak voice answered, "Come in, darling." She opened the door and almost fell to the ground in utter shock and dismay. Her beautiful mother lay on the bed, covered by a blanket, but even Hinata's premature eyes could see the blood splotches. "Come here, my love." Her mother stretched out of her hand from within the blanket to her daughter. The girl nodded, but knowing that her mother couldn't see, for her eyes were covered by a cloth. Hinata took her mother's hand and sat by her side. "Mama, what has happened?" she sobbed. "Shoo," Hitomi consoled her young daughter. "Don't cry, my love," Otsuma said. Hinata couldn't bring herself to say the words. The tears dropped on their joined hands. "I know." Hitomi gave a sad smile, bringing Hinata's hands and kissed it. "It's time, Hinata." "No, no," Hinata yelled. "You can't die. I won't let you. No one can stop death, darling." Hitomi was quick to get that notion out of her daughter's head. They didn't have much time, and she knew Hinata would need all the guidance she could get. The elders would be unforgiving towards any perceived weakness. Hinata was going to argue, but her mother cut her off. Always remember, Odo-san loves, Oka-chan loves you. Be brave, Hinata. Be strong. But most of all, be kind. Even on the edge of death's door, Hitomi couldn't bear the thought of her lively and always smiling daughter becoming the emotionless masked females that the Hyuga insisted on. There are too many cruel people in this world anyway. Promise me. Yes, yes, I promise, Hinata cried, throwing herself forward and hugging her mother's injured body. Hitomi, as she hugged her back fiercely, wished more than anything to be able to see her daughters just one more time. She had already said her goodbye to 3 old Hanabi, but her youngest was too young to know what was going on. "Goodbye, my love." But as fate would have it, she was spared the image of her daughter in agony, for Hitomi had already passed away. "Mama, Mama." Hinata shook her mother. No, no, please. You can't leave. Wake up, wake up. Mama, I need you." Her yells and cries had attracted the attention of the other maids nearby who rushed into the room. Hinata's jostling had taken the cloth off her mother's eyes, making the maids wince as one of them hurried to replace the cloth. The sight that greeted her was one she would never forget. "No!" Hinata screamed, dread washing over her, turning to rage unlike anything the little girl had ever felt, which in turn turned to hate. Hate for those who had committed this heinous crime against an angel like her mother. Hitomi's eyelids were open, but the pale eyes of the Hyuga weren't seen, for they were missing. "Oka-chan." Hinata woke, looking towards the door leading to her parents' chambers, wishing for her mother to come and soothe her back to sleep from the nightmare. But then the 13-year-old realized it was not a nightmare. It was her memory. Her mother was not going to come for her. Let it end. Just let it end. Hinata took a deep, hitching breath and fell back on a bed, sobbing in her pillow for a good long while. Ever since her mother had died from the injuries, she had suffered on a mission gone wrong, and came back with her eyes missing. Hinata couldn't get the image out of her head. And although the memory didn't arise that often anymore, It still came to her when she was particularly stressed, plaguing her thoughts and sleep. I, I miss you, Hinata cried, paying no attention to the tears staining her pillowcase. The maids were all used to it at this point. Even though they used to ask of her before, they had ceased to some years ago. I miss you so much, Okachan. As her body was still racked with sobs, like it usually was when she had that dream, Hinata lay in bed until she had calmed down sufficiently. Looking at the fancy alarm clock on her side table, it was just past 8. Oh my. Hinata almost jumped out of bed in her hurry to get to the washroom. If she didn't hurry, she would end up being late for training with her team. She didn't usually oversleep her alarm, but this time, she had ignored it, trying to calm down. The maids had washed her clothes, and they had laid her ninja gear on the dresser and her jacket. She was a Hyuga, even if she was the worst one, and thus was aware of what people thought of her dressing in her bulky jacket. It had become obvious in the academy, but no one ever said it, of course. Even they knew that insulting the heiress to the Hyuga clan, albeit a weak one, was a one-way ticket to incite trouble and invite Hayashi's wrath on them. But she was much too shy to dress in form-fitting clothes. She desperately hoped to overcome it one day and be as confident as kunoichis like Sakura-san and Ino-san, who were very comfortable in their bodies, or Kurinai-sensei. Hinata was well aware of the effect all three had on boys and men, and that the three even relished it to a point. Unlike them, she had no such interest. Well, except for one boy. But it seems it was her fate that he never seems to notice her, always looking to the much prettier and confident Sakura. Not that she blamed him, of course. "Oh, you're in a hurry, Hinata-sama," said Nanao Hyuga, a maid from the branch family as she entered, wearing a maid's apron over the traditional Hyuga robes. "What?" "Yes, Nanao-san," Hinata replied, sipping her miso soup in as hurriedly dignified manner as she could. It would not do to look like Kiba. She saved herself from snorting by the sudden comical image in her mind. She couldn't imagine someone like Kiba in such a strict and organized household like hers. Meeting the team, Nanao nodded and went on to remove the sheets of the bed, throwing a kind sort of smile at the young girl as she saw the pillow damp with tear spots. A couple of years ago, she would have asked if Hinata-sama was okay, but with the embarrassment it causes the poor girl every time, she had stopped asking. It wasn't really well known that the young heiress doesn't stutter with those she feels uncomfortable with. Unfortunately, most of the Hyuga, her own clan, weren't included in this list. As far as Nanao knew, Hinata was only comfortable with her team, and Hanabi-sama, or maybe herself. No matter how many times Hinata had asked Nanao not to call her Sama, the friendly maid would still address her with proper deference. Hinata wasn't that naive as to think it was just because she liked her, unlike most of her clan. Any disrespect or perceived disrespect could be punished by activating the seal. Hinata had seen it a few times, and her heart went out to those of the branch families. She had once or twice commented about the unnecessity of it, and was punished dearly for it. She hadn't dared since then. But it was no wonder that some of the branch families held contempt for those in the main branch, and she may be one of them soon. No, she shook her head. There was no use having such useless thoughts. She dreaded her future children being given the seal, and would do everything she could to prevent it. Hinata snuck a look at Nanao-san, who was busy laying down the fresh sheets on her bed. Even though she was a chunin, she was relegated to the work of a maid within the clan when she wasn't on duty. It really was unfair, and a waste of her skills. However, it wasn't that Hinata didn't like her that kept her from being open with the maid. It was her that she couldn't read. Unlike the elders in her father's eyes, which held only contempt for her, Hinata didn't see that in some of the branch family members. Sometimes, in Nanao-san's eyes, Hinata saw pity, but that wasn't uncommon. She hated it, but it was the truth. But it was the hope she sometimes saw in her maid's eyes before it was quickly covered that confused her. Who would hope for her? Why? And why would they lay their hopes in her? And it was with these thoughts that she was shocked when Nanao-san said, "Hinata-sama, Hayashi-sama wishes for you to meet with him when you return from your training." Hinata's head snapped up, wondering what her father could say to her now. Her relationship with her father had started deteriorating ever since Hanabi-chan had started showing her potential in the way of jukin. Okay, Nanasen, Hinata replied, knowing that this was no request, but the maid had changed the wording to probably soften the manner in which it was said. She didn't envy her younger sister. Okay, maybe she did a little, but more than that, she was worried for her. She was too young for the Hyuga Council to burden her. There was also a burgeoning hope that her father might want to see her for her training. But she better than to put much stock in such hopes. It had never turned out well for her in the past. She didn't want to think about the last time he had summoned her like this after they had returned from the mission to Wave. She didn't want to think about his eyes when he learned of her little contribution in the mission, and that she allowed the boys to battle the Roguenin. Hinata had known that there was no use lying to him in order to hide her failure, even if she was brave enough to do so. He probably had already read the mission reports, being on the Shinobi Council as he was. But she would worry about the nature of this meeting when she returned. There was no use in stressing herself out now, before her team training and likely a mission or two. With that, she packed her lunch and hurried out of the house before she could be summoned by her father, in case the Hyuga had changed his mind. It didn't take long for her to reach Training Ground 8 where her team met. Hinata tried to not pay much attention to the fact that it was right opposite Training Ground 7 where Naruto Koen's team meets, where she would probably not be able to pay attention to anything. Even if Kakashi-sensei was a celebrated and accomplished jounin with much experience, Hinata didn't envy Team 7. For even if Kurenai-sensei wasn't a ninjutsu specialist or focused on taijutsu, at least she was on time. Not that the newly minted jounin wasn't strong in taijutsu. Hinata hadn't managed to beat her in even one of the spars they've had since the formation of their team. Good morning, Hinata. Kurenai greeted her genin, who, very unlike her, was almost late and had shown up even after Kiba. Hi, good morning, sensei, Hinata replied meekly. Kurenai immediately picked up on her genin's discomfort. She usually didn't stutter with her. Something must have happened in the morning. Shino probably picked up on it too, given the slight raise of his head. Kiba, as usual, was oblivious and excited to get started. Knowing she would do no good by bringing attention to whatever it was in front of her teammates, she resolved to ask Hinata about it later. Are we training already or what? Kiba whined impatiently, with Akamaru giving a bark as if he agreed too. Patience, Kiba, Kurenai reminded the brash Inuzuka yet again. She wondered why she had been given a brash Inuzuka, who, like his clan, focuses on nintai jutsu. Sarutobi was well aware that she had little patience for men who don't tend to think. But then again, given the alternate was Uzumaki, she would rather take Kiba. Yes, she had heard about his surprising ability to create shadow clones, but given what he was, it wasn't that surprising that he would have the chakra capacity to do so. First of all, I need you all three to warm up. Run around the ground for 5 laps, then we'll get started. Hi, the genin replied and quickly got to it, with Hinata meekly shuffling and putting her things away before taking off after her teammates. Kurenai sighed. She knew she was a newly minted jounin and that it would take some time for her to get her genin to shed their bad habits. But so far, they hadn't changed much since the last day of the academy. She remembered the day like it was yesterday, when she had visited the academy the week before the exam to observe the genin she had been given the files on. That could change depending on the exam scores and the number of genin who pass, but better safe than sorry was her motto. And so, she had cloaked herself in a double-layered genjutsu and observed Irika's class. Unlike what the current rookies thought, there were more genin than just one graduating class. After all, it would be highly impractical to pass only 9 ninja a year. Not only would they not have enough to patrol their borders, but they would be at a very high disadvantage if the Leaf were to be suddenly at war with the likes of Kyumo or IWA. As such, most of the students who do not pass the genin exam and the subsequent test by their respective jounin instructors were either sent back to the academy or sent to ninja boot camp. She didn't know who headed that, but she had heard that he was one sadistic maniac and had a talent for converting the boot camp ninja into Chunin within a maximum of 2 years. Being a Jounin, however, Kurenai had access to higher security clearance and was well aware that Konoha currently had 40,000 ninja on its active roster, with almost 20,000 in the village. While this number was certainly more than Kiri and Suna, not to mention those hidden villages not in the Great Five, they weren't as much as Kyumo or IWA boasted. The two larger, hidden villages naturally had more ninja, but Kurenai was of the opinion that Konoha had better quality of shinobi. After all, they had won the last war. Kyumo and IWA had surrendered with heavy penalties. Nearing their 5th round, Hinata was somewhat winded. Shino looked like he could go another round or so before needing a break. Kiba, the energetic alpha he was, seemed to be in high spirits. Sighing, she was reminded of their recent painful encounter with the Rogue Nin on their recent mission. Her team should never have been sent. What was Sarutobi thinking? She had been furious when she realized who their enemy was. However, it also reminded her that she couldn't coddle her genin any longer. They needed to get stronger. Okay, warm-up's over, she called out. Hinata needed to catch her breath for almost 2 minutes as she cooled down. She saw the serious look in her sensei's face and instantly knew that if Kiba tried his whining today or crack a joke, he would regret it. Now, you have all had a week's break after coming back from Wave, and then a week of normal D rank missions. Kurenai-sensei began, and Hinata listened with rapt attention. She was aware that she hadn't performed well in their first ever C-rank mission and was eager to improve. I want your opinions on your own performances. I would have kicked the Ice Freak's ass if Naruto Dobe hadn't gone bursting in like the idiot he is, Kiba growled, punching his fist, though he did wilt a bit seeing Kurenai's glare. That is not true. Shino, however, shook his head. You ask why. That is because your attacks weren't having an effect on his ice blocks from the outside. Kiba. However, the Inuzuka took the criticism the wrong way and immediately flamed up. Are you saying I'm weaker than the Dobe? The Dobe had, for some inexplicable reason, been able to break one of the mirrors. Shino shook his head. Clearly his teammate was unwilling to see their own faults. I did not. However, since Naruto-san's attacks worked, and ours didn't lend some credence to that assumption. Why you little? Kiba was indignant. It was bad enough that the Dobe had somehow shown him up on their first ever C-rank mission, but now even his team were siding with the dead last, conveniently forgetting that Hinata hadn't said anything. Oh no. I think Hinata tried to defuse the tension, but Kurenai had enough of the bickering. Enough. All 3 genin quietened immediately, looking at their sensei, who looked quite disappointed in them. And disappointed she was, as evident by her tone. It is clear to me now that ever since our joint training session, Team 10, you have become overconfident in your training. Hinata's eyes widened as she vigorously shook her head. While it was true that she had been marginally better than Ino-san that day, she was far from overconfident in her own abilities. But she also knew it was wise not to interrupt their sensei now. Kiba, however, hadn't realized that. What? Of course not, but wilted at the harsh look on the normally cheerful Jounin's face. Kurenai stood and paced, well aware that she was making her team uncomfortable, but they needed to learn the lesson. They needed to come to the conclusion themselves. Her merely telling them their flaws would do little to no good. In Kiba's case, it could also backfire. Shino, she said, and immediately noted the boy sat up straighter, although nothing else in his posture changed. Again, I want you to reflect on your own performance. Shino stayed quiet for a few seconds before offering, I have realized that my ninjutsu is not versatile enough to combat wide-range attacks, such as Haku's Ice Blasts. I was also chakra exhausted quickly. Kurenai nodded. While he had missed out a crucial point, knowing Shino, it was probably because he didn't think it was logical rather than hide his flaw. She would be talking about it, though, if one of the others didn't bring it up. Kiba, she prompted him. This time, the Inuzuka wisely kept any problems to himself and didn't grumble like last time. He did, however, surprise her by thinking before speaking this time. I wasn't fast enough, he said with a disgruntled look. It was an oversimplification based on misguided pride. But that was understandable, since the Inazukas prided themselves on the fastest taijutsu style in Konoha. And she agreed, for the most part. As expected, Hinata was the most aware of her flaws. Whether she would know how to go about correcting it was a different matter entirely. Oh no, taijutsu wasn't strong enough. Hinata pushed her fingers together like was her habit when she was nervous. My Byakugan wasn't fast enough to keep track of him. And I was scared. Hinata's finished quietly. This likely caused her more shame, Kurenai guessed. She knew Hinata had become used to the constant belittling of her abilities that she had faced as a child, by her father and the elders. What she wouldn't do to be able to beat the arrogance out of those wide-eyed, emotionless bastards. Here she was trying to build up this girl's confidence, and every day Hinata went back home and they were back to square one. But that was a problem for later. Maybe she needed a specialist's opinion. Kurenai responded, "Good," thinking that maybe that might cheer up the girl somewhat. It was clear she was very hung up on her performance last mission. To be fair, Kurenai added, you three have barely been Jinin more than 2 months. It is unfair for anyone to expect you to fight perfectly well against Chunin and above. The fact that all three of you survived without any debilitating injuries is a testament to your hard work. She needed to make sure they didn't think that she didn't appreciate the effort they were putting in. True to her words, all 3 children brightened up. Well, it was hard to tell with Shino. But it was also obvious that we have been neglecting an essential part of the training. Kurenai partly blamed herself for it. That of endurance, stamina, and strength. Let me be perfectly clear, for we need to improve not only for missions, but for another reason as well, which I will tell you later. Shino, your ninjutsu needs to be varied, yes, but you also need to work more on your taijutsu more than your clan abilities, which I think you are sufficiently well-versed in. Like Haku did, any ninja Chunin level or above can figure out your weakness by the first 2 moves you make and know that you're a long-range fighter and work to counter it, like Haku did. Shino nodded, although a tad stiffly for her liking. Perhaps he thought it sounded like an insult to his clan, who almost all of them focus on their bugs. Kiba and the kid with the dog perked up. You and Akamaru need better teamwork and coordination, but that will come with time. Having said that, you need to be an independent ninja as well and not depend on Akamaru so much. What Haku did was the classic divide and conquer approach, where he took out Akamaru and then fought you. You also let your emotions cloud your judgment when he attacked Akamaru. I know he's your partner, but you need a handle on your emotions and missions, and especially during battle. Akamaru whined a little. In protest, she imagined, but Kiba wisely didn't share what the puppet said, but only nodded in response. His earlier excitement subdued a little. She imagined it would brighten up for what they were going to do next. Hinata, Kurenai sighed, knowing the girl was still quite fragile. Yes, your taijutsu was weak. Hinata wilted and seemed to shrink within herself. So Kurenai was quick to console her with the upside. But it was expected when fighting against a Jounin-level ninja. No one expected you to defeat him. That did little to help the timid girl, and so she added, let's not forget that you weren't the only Genin he defeated, but your main problem in your battle were your nerves. They cause you to second-guess yourself multiple times and cause your attacks to falter. Hinata nodded, having realized the same herself. She had faltered in her attacks multiple times, and Haku had capitalized on it, even though he didn't injure her. Probably because of Naruto, her mind added. Once again, the blonde ninja had come to her rescue, albeit unknowingly. All in all, Kurenai prepared to end her case, seeing that the Genin and her were on the same page now. If Team 7 hadn't been present, and if Haku had been a more ruthless shinobi, I would doubt the outcome of the fight would be the same. It was said quiet leniently, but they all knew the meaning. They would be dead if Haku had wanted them dead. The fact he only injured them and used Sunban was a part not a little confusing to them. Perhaps because he had turned out to be Naruto's friend. How was Kakashi's student this stupid was something Kurenai could not understand. he had talked to and given information to a passerby, and who had turned out to be an enemy ninja. It was a serious error in judgment that Kakashi was willing to let slide. Before her students could get bogged down in reflection again, and they seemed to be swaying dangerously close to a topic that was an S-ranked secret in their village in their hushed whispers, Kurenai decided to turn the tables. Okay, enough reflection. Stand up, she ordered, and her genin obeyed immediately. From now onwards, we will focus more on stamina and taijutsu until we have all improved a decent amount, and then we'll add in other things. Now, you all have your own specific katas. Shino, you use the style your father taught you. Shino and Hinata, you spar. One of you will purely attack, and the other will defend. Then swap. Kiba, you're with me. All right, time to get some blood pumping. Kiba jumped in the air. Clearly, thinking and reflecting was not his forte. As expected, Hinata was shakier today than she had been on previous sessions. She wasn't able to block or defend Shino's attacks that she would have had no problem with before. As such, Kurenai felt it necessary to pair Hinata up with herself and go through the same cycle. With careful encouragement of her defense and attacks, Hinata improved slightly, mainly as her nerves had settled. The main problem with Kurenai was that she was not aware of Jukin's katas and couldn't instruct her properly in the art. She needed someone who was. And unfortunately, that wasn't possible unless she went to Hayashi and asked him. There must be some other way. Even more disturbing was the fact that she clearly sees bruised wrists and shins, red on the verge of turning purple. Hinata kicks, and Kurenai easily dodges, slowing down her speed to imitate a sort of real spar for genin. Hinata barely blocks a punch and lashes out with an open palm to her stomach. A little impressed with the viciousness of the assault, Kurenai pretended to be caught off guard and decided to let it by and see how far she would be willing to take it. However, she was again disappointed when unexpectedly Hinata, at the last minute, subtly changed the trajectory of her palm and only grazed her abdomen. She was too kind. It was a good thing in life. But in battle, it was a disaster and was likely to get herself killed. It wasn't that she didn't have the skills, which she definitely did. Kurenai immediately backed off, and instead of dodging right like Hinata clearly expected her to, and went in for another palm strike, Kurenai lashed out with a roundhouse kick. It struck true, confirming Kurenai's earlier suspicions about Hinata and the way of Jukin. From what she had gathered over the years, having worked with several Hyugas, she refused to think about Madatai. Jukin was a complicated, strict set of katas, a set of very defined movements. That wasn't to say it wasn't brutal and highly effective. In fact, it was the most devastating taijutsu style in Konoha and probably the elemental nations, which also explains why the Hyugas guard their secrets so jealously. But Hinata's style and personality didn't suit it very well. What she needed was a style from which she could seamlessly flow from one movement into another, where she didn't have to halt her momentum and change track so suddenly. Taijutsu was very much like a dance, Kurenai liked to think so, where one has to adjust their movements in response to the opponents. However, Jukin wasn't like that, which conflicted with Hinata's lack of ability to stop her attack in a moment's notice and change it up with another move. Arf, Hinata went down instantly, a few feet away but hesitantly got up again, swaying on her feet before she lowered her center of gravity in the Jukin style and waited. Smiling, Kurenai nodded. Hinata wasn't hopeless. No, she was improving. Whereas 2 months ago, she wouldn't even have gotten up after a defeat, this time she did, albeit hesitantly. Whereas 2 months, she wouldn't have known to change tactics, and now she did. Her instincts were well-tuned, and she could change strikes subtly. Yes, Hinata had a lot of potential. If only she believed in herself. Looking to her watch, 3 hours had already gone by, and Kakashi was about to arrive at his spot. Signaling to the 3 genin, she called them to her good. I trust this session has shown you the importance of getting out of comfort zone in training. All 3 nodded expectantly. They hadn't just sparred. Kurenai had put them through the paces with endurance training. I'm glad. Now, for the next part of today's exercise. She was met with curious looks. Clearly her team was expecting them to go on a mission like they usually do, albeit it was later than normal. Espionage. Quite predictably, her words were met with shocked looks. Naruto was sore. Sorer than he had ever been in his life. And considering that his broken arm could heal within half a day, that was saying something. He cursed his own stupidity. What the hell had possessed him to disregard what Guy had suggested and put on more weights than 20 kilograms? A week had passed since Naruto had met the odd neon green duo, but so far in his life as Genin, he could safely say that it had been the most productive. Given that his lazy-ass sensei was not going to train him, he had gratefully agreed to Guy's suggestion of using weights to increase his speed, stamina, and endurance. Every day, he trained in the morning with his weights on, then went back to his apartment and dropped them off before joining his team. Every day since then, he had challenged Sasuke to a spar, and every day he had lost. Abysmally in some cases. But still, Naruto persevered. But it was what happened yesterday which took the cake. They had just finished team training, which was a joke, and Naruto had just lost another spar with Sasuke when Kakashi told him to stay back. A number of questions went through his head. Had Kakashi learned of the scrolls? Had he learned of his weights? Or that he had been training with Guy and Lee? Was he going to forbid him from it? As a sensei, could the guy restrict his training even more than he was doing now? Kakashi waited until both Sasuke and Sakura were out of the ground before addressing the boy, who likely would start yelling. "Naruto, you have to stop this," he said bluntly. A look on confusion spread across the whiskered face. "What do you mean, Kakashi-sensei?" Kakashi resisted the urge to glare at the boy. "You know what I mean, Naruto? I want you to stop challenging Sasuke every time you guys meet." Now Naruto was really confused. Wait, what? How am I supposed to get stronger then? Aren't we supposed to spar with teammates? Where is this idiot sensei going with this? Kakashi shook his head. Normally, yes. But in this case, no. Yours and Sasuke's rivalry has gone beyond the point of normal competitiveness. It's damaging the teamwork, don't you see? You challenge Sasuke, Sakura gets angry. Sasuke gets moody for wasting time, and then you don't work together well for missions. But what about my taijutsu training? Naruto couldn't give a flying fuck if Sasuke was a moody bastard. He was always moody. You could train with Sakura. That is when you have finished bringing your basics up to par with your teammates. Until then, Sakura will be training on her endurance and stamina. And you on your chakra control. Kakashi gave him an eye smile, trying to give what he wanted with but piece by piece. Seeing that Naruto was about to argue, he continued, "And when you progress, then you can start sparring with Sasuke again. Right now, it's nothing but a waste of time for both you and him. You're not learning anything by getting beaten around, and he's not learning anything new by doing the same thing again and again." Naruto grumbled at the unfairness of it all. "But I'm already better than Sakura-chan." Kakashi shook his head. Why did he have to get Genin, who refused to see what teamwork actually meant? Naruto, teamwork doesn't mean you have to be stronger than your teammate. It means you have to be stronger together. The blonde ninja glared at his hypocritical sensei. Then why do you train Sasuke alone? Why is he getting stronger alone? Kakashi knew that the blonde had a point there, but he couldn't just tell him the truth. That Sasuke was truly a flight risk, and Konoha couldn't have its last Uchiha run away on his foolish revenge quest and get killed by his much stronger brother. He wasn't ready to face Itachi yet, and if Sasuke tried, it would undoubtedly result in his death. But he decided to appeal to Naruto's sense of nobility. The ninja had that in spades. "Naruto, I'll be honest with you. Sasuke's too consumed with revenge. He needs my attention to stay straight. And with his Sharingan maturing, I am the only one who can teach him." Naruto only saw one flaw in Kakashi's answer. It didn't fucking have anything to do with him. Having Sakura train for stamina made sense, since hers was shitty. But that still left him, and his anger grew at the sensei. "Fine," he spat, turning away rapidly. "I won't ask him for spars or you for training." Unlike what his sensei thought, Naruto wasn't sparring with Sasuke because he had a fetish for being beaten, but because he was analyzing Sasuke's moves and katas. For the past week, Naruto had stationed multiple shadow clones at different points, so they could observe and take notes on Sasuke's fancy moves from different angles. Sadly, Naruto had realized two things after the first attempt at stalking Sasuke. 1. Sasuke lived in a flat, and not in the Uchiha district like he had thought. 2. He had a very good chance of running into his other fangirls who also stalked him, and being caught while stalking the resident heartthrob was a bad idea. And so, Naruto had resorted to observing Sasuke during training. Even sadder was the fact that Naruto couldn't hide clones to observe Sasuke's fight with Kakashi because the sensei was too observant. He would surely pick up on it, and then he would have to confess what he had been doing. Kakashi may have called for him after he had walked away, but Naruto was too pissed to reply. And so, Naruto, after the team training, had changed his leg and arm weights. 20 kilograms was doing nothing for him, and he had gotten used to it in 3 days. Instead of having 20 kilograms on his arms and legs, Naruto had strapped on 20 kilograms on each arm, leg, waist, and chest, and did his training with those on. So, a total of 80 kilograms on his person. And he was paying for it now, as he trudged back, taking step after careful step away from Team Guy's training ground. Naruto grunted, having to sit on the bench nearby, exhausted and in pain as he was. I'm an idiot. I agree, came the reply from nearby in that droning voice he had heard 2 weeks ago. Naruto whipped around, and immediately his aching muscles told him it wasn't a good idea. He would have jumped if his body had been able to. Old man, fancy seeing you here. The only response he got from the bandage creep was a narrowing of his lone eye. Coincidental. Naruto snorted. If that was true, he would eat the Hokage's hat. But for now, he let the old man say that until he figured out what he wanted with him. I'm sure. In front of him was a different board game. This time, he recognized it instantly. Shikamaru used to play it in the academy. Shogi. Indeed, the man replied, already having set up the pieces. Also called the general's game. Do you know the rules? Naruto shook his head. He had never paid much attention, if at all, in the academy. No. The old man nodded his head and, without prompting, proceeded to explain the basic rules and strategies to him. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the man. What was this crippled freak up to? Naruto had realized that this man did nothing for no reason. And so, he tried to figure him out, since it was too early to show up at Training Ground 7. Not that Naruto could even walk that far without taking his weights off. The man inwardly smirked as the boy, without any prompting, had taken the seat in front of him and was listening intently to him. So what if Hiruzen had forbidden him to train the vessel? He never said anything about not playing a game with him. And if the boy was smart, as he knew he was, he would apply what he learned from a simple board game to other, more useful things. Naruto knew that he was going to lose every time he played the man. So, the first 5 times was no surprise. Not that Naruto wasn't learning. No, he was learning about his enemy in this case. The man never did anything without a reason. Every move was well planned, executed, and unpredictable. The man sacrificed his own pawns, rooks, and knights without a second thought if it was going to give him a favorable position to trap Naruto. What kind of man did that make him? Devious, to be sure. This man was deception personified. Naruto was beginning to realize. Was he like this in real life as well? Just as clinically efficient in combat, in personal relationships? Somehow, he didn't think the man had any personal relationships. The man, for the most part, knew what the boy was doing, and it amused him to no end. Not that any of the amusement even showed on his face. The day this boy was able to read him was the day he would eat the Hokage's hat. That's not to say he wasn't impressed by it. The vessel had improved since his time in the academy, he knew. Not just because of the reports he had gotten, but it was also obvious. Whether that idiot Kakashi saw it or not was another matter entirely. If deception was a shinobi's greatest strength, then the mind was the muscle that wielded it, and the boy was improving his mind. Of that there was no doubt. The boy was unpredictable and relentless. As he reset the board for the sixth time, he had that at least going for him. The boy was failing to adapt his moves, none of which were too clever to his own strategies. But that wasn't the point. He was thinking how to outmaneuver him, which was the important part. Too many nations train their vessels to be hammers, forces of mass destruction. But he knew better. In a shinobi world, a ninja needed to be a scalpel as well as a hammer, a follower as well as the leader, the knight as well as the general. That was especially true for those such as Uzumaki. True, the boy's development had been severely stunted by the fools in the academy, but better late than never. He knew he was taking a risk by meeting the boy like this every few weeks, but it was for Konoha. Naruto smiled the sixth time his king got checked. He might have lost again, but this time it had taken 10 moves instead of 8. He kept his smugness as hidden as he could, lest the man thought he had learnt nothing from the book. As if he read his mind, the man asked, "What did you think about the book?" If Naruto was on edge before, he was suspicious now. How had the man even known he had finished reading it? "I liked it, but I don't agree with some of his points." "Oh," was the man's reply, with a raised eyebrow. "You think you know better?" Naruto shook his head. No, he had been cured of that idiocy in Wave. "No, I don't agree with the part about not relaxing in front enemies, and a shinobi should always resort to ninjutsu last." "And why is that?" the man responded. "Anyone can disagree just for sake of disagreeing, but to present a logical counterargument was another matter entirely." Naruto shrugged. "I think it's counterproductive to the idea of deception." He knew such words now after having to look them up in the dictionary many times. If you're tensed, the enemy will likely be on their guard and expect something to happen. Why give them a heads up when you can take them off guard? The man smirked, pleased at the boy for having reasoned as such. It was what he himself had said to the Nidaime years ago. And so, he responded with the reason his sensei had given him. Because most of the time, it benefits more to show the enemy that you are aware of him and that you will not be intimidated or fooled. That you don't fear. It's better to make them fear you. If you're relaxed, you have more chances of missing when the enemy deceives you. Because while you were relaxing, you forgot that the enemy was studying you. Naruto had the decency to blush at being caught red-handed. However, it was time to take into account something he had learned and try for some active information gathering. Naruto nodded, pretending to think it over. "And I'm almost sure that the last few chapters were added in by someone else, and not the Nidaime." The man stayed silent for a second, but then, unpredictably, he shifted gears. "You have taken to learning from that neon green, wearing ninja." Naruto was having trouble keeping up with the man, jumping from topic to topic. How did the man know about Guy? His eyes narrowed in further suspicion. This was getting weirder every time. As if he had heard Naruto's unasked question, the man answered, "I can see the outlines of the weights under your clothes. And your muscles are stiff and sore, judging by how you walked and sat over here. There are only 2 other ninja in Konoha who use such an outdated method of training." Naruto almost growled in protest at the insult to Guy. But then he remembered Tobirama's lesson of keeping his temper and releasing it an opportune moment. This wasn't it. And from the look in the man's one eye and the crooked smile, the creep knew it too. "What do you mean?" Naruto asked instead. "Outdated." The man sighed audibly, which was anew as far as Naruto had learned about him. Unless the sigh had a purpose as well. A signal maybe. There are other ways of increasing one's speed and strength without loading unnecessary weights on himself. Naruto was now intrigued. "Is it better?" he asked excitedly. "Merely, it has different results," the man answered noncommittally. He was curious as to how long the boy thought he could keep up dancing around the issue. He hadn't been a veteran of 2 shinobi wars and not have learned that something else was troubling the boy. In his opinion, if the boy kept fixating on his personal problems like a child, he would never get strong. But it was no use telling him that yet. The boy needed to come to that conclusion himself. Only then will it truly change him. "What is it called?" Naruto asked the man, somewhat suspiciously. Guy had told him that nothing worth having comes through taking shortcuts in life. And Naruto wholeheartedly agreed with that. So, he was surprised when a man responded, and it wasn't a shortcut. At least, it didn't sound like it. It is called Fuin Jutsu, also known as sealing jutsu. It can be used for many things, such as summoning weapons or animals to fight, or binding and trapping enemies. Explosive seals use Fuin Jutsu as well. In some cases, Fuin Jutsu is much stronger than ninjutsu or jinjutsu. Naruto loved the sound of that. If he could learn one art and use it for so many different things in a fight, it would be awesome. He fought hard to control his excitement at such a prospect. At least until the man ended his explanation with, weight training can be done with weight and resistance seals, but the method is dangerous. Dangerous? Naruto asked confusedly. How so? There goes his excitement. Sealing is a very complicated art, needing extreme chakra control, although not as much as medical ninjutsu. If the seals which are applied on your body go wrong, it can be disastrous. Exploding limbs is the least concern then. Naruto blanched and nodded, knowing he wasn't going to be attempting anything that blow off his limbs anytime soon. Can Fuin Jutsu be learnt using books? Knowing against it, but hoping that the man would say yes. Surprisingly, the man nodded. The basics of a sealing can be learnt using books, yes. But then one needs the instruction of a master. I need a sensei, Naruto admitted grumpily, having gotten tired of dancing around the sore subject. You already have one, the man pointed out, now packing up the shogi board and chips. Naruto eyed the scroll the man had taken out. Weirdly, what the hell was he going to do with that? I need a new sensei. Kakashi teaches me nothing. You are a genin. You are responsible for your own training, the man replied, laying the board on top of the open scroll, which had a weird design printed on it. Naruto's stomach did a backflip, and he struggled to contain his shock. He recognized the design. Somewhat. Barely. Knowing that the man would surely tell him of his failure of keeping his emotions in check, he shifted his attention on something else. I can't train myself all the time. I need some guidance, Naruto grumbled to the old man. Even the Yondaime didn't get that good without a sensei. The Yondaime sensei was a fool. The man spat and paused. The creep seemed to be thinking of something because he didn't speak for a few minutes. Naruto could sense something was happening. He could sense the man gathering chakra, although he didn't know how he knew that. But the man sat still, not doing anything. What the hell was he molding chakra for? And how the hell was he doing it? Both of his hands were on the table. He could hardly mold chakra without using hand signs. Irika-sensei had told him that was impossible. I told you, the man responded after a while. I'm not going to train you, Uzumaki. I am an old man. Che, what a ridiculous excuse. Hokage Gigi isn't old. Doesn't mean he can't beat anyone in this village. And I'm not asking for training from you, Danzo-san. Just some tips. Naruto had done his research on who the man could possibly be and had only come up with one possible answer. And from the way the man had dodged his question about adding the last chapters in the book, or the way the man quoted Tobirama, as if he had trained under him, had confirmed his suspicion. It was then merely the matter of finding out the names of the second Hokage's genin teams and eliminate them by those he knew of and those he didn't. He couldn't read the look in a man's eye, but it seemed vaguely of approval. You're wasting your time here, Uzumaki. The man got up and turned to leave. But Naruto had other plans. Do you have another book for me? The man half turned his head, and without speaking threw a black, colored journal to him. Go to the Hokage Tower if you want a sensei. Wait, what? What the hell does that mean? He asked, looking up from the journal only to see the man disappear once again, just like last time. However, this time Naruto distinctly sensed the gathering and burst of his chakra. I've got to learn this jutsu, Naruto mumbled to himself, and noted that in the 2 hours he had been sitting here, his muscle soreness had decreased by a lot. He could even move properly now. For the most part. Fuck, he cursed, barely catching himself in time before he fell. He had definitely pulled something in his left leg. And with Naruto trudged back to his apartment to put his weights back. Guy had lent him Lee's entire set off body weights with the sole condition that he not tell anyone, and Naruto had readily agreed. If he didn't want his team knowing it, it was expected that Lee would want to hide it from his rivals as well. As to who they were, Naruto had no clue. The moment he had taken off his weights was like heaven. Naruto felt like he was walking on air and laughed at the top of his lungs. Any passers who would have heard the cackling would have undoubtedly labeled him as finally losing his mind. Naruto felt great until the moment he took an unweighted step and promptly fell over his face. Naruto grunted as he got up. What the hell? He was left so out of balance, not having nearly 100 kg on his tiny body, that he had completely lost his balance. But there was no time to dawdle, getting used to the free feeling for the few hours that he would be with his team. Okay, you can do this, Uzumaki, he said to himself, crouching down in the racer position and readying himself. And with a burst of chakra from his feet, Naruto was off like a bullet. Or at least a wonky and curvy bullet that found it hard to go straight. Granted, Naruto had fallen and nearly crashed many times, but he had managed to get himself to the bridge in one piece, where Sasuke and Sakura were standing. And just like he had predicted, Sakura's shrill yell emerged from her throat the moment he showed up in front of them, not even needing his eyes to see where they were. He had sensed their position from 2 blocks away. Why was he able to sense chakra signatures now? He didn't know, but it was cool nonetheless. Maybe he could train this ability somehow. I need to ask the old man about it next time. But for some reason, Naruto got the feeling that telling Kakashi-sensei or even the Hokage about his meeting with Danzo was a bad idea. Why he thinks that, Naruto has no idea. But it seemed like the logical thing to do. Naruto, you're late. Sakura whirled towards him, an intent of punching his head like she was used to. She decided against it when she saw his state. You baka? Why are you so sweaty? Get away from me, she yelled, disgust clearly written on her face. While Naruto felt hurt, he refused to show it. You're the one who came close to me, Sakura-chan. He teased, stepping even closer to her. Iwiu, Sakura squirmed away, not wanting to sweat anywhere on her dress. Her eye twitching, she lashed out with one right hook to the boy's head, fuming. Ow, 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 Sakura-chan. Naruto rubbed the bump on his head. He could have dodged it, but decided to see if they had noticed anything. While Sasuke had raised an eyebrow when he had shown up, the team soon turned his head away, safe in the knowledge that Naruto was still an idiot. What's your problem, team? Naruto asked, narrowing his eyes at the arrogant Uchiha, all the while stepping closer to Sakura, making her wrinkle her nose and step away. You're sweating like a pig. Naruto baka, she yelled, intent of pushing him away with her hands. Sasuke turned and glared at his idiotic teammate. You got winded just by running all the way here. Can you be any more pathetic? Naruto closed his fist in front of his face. Oh yeah, smart ass. You won't be saying that when I whoop your ass without even trying. Before Sasuke could answer, Sakura punch bounced off of Naruto's head. Ow, Sakura-chan. I said get away from me, you sweaty fool. Sakura wiped her hands off of her green biker shorts. HN, you haven't managed that even once. Sasuke smirked, content with the knowledge that the dobe could never challenge him if he couldn't even stop Sakura's punches. Granted, they seemed like they hurt, given the lump forming over the dobe's head, but still. I'll show you, you jackass. Naruto spat heatedly, pointing his finger at the arrogant jerk, but inwardly he was smirking. It seems that neither had realized anything else. He was worried for a second that they would notice the change in his speed. Or maybe the team had and was pretending not to. Naruto knew now, after Zabuza, and especially Danzo, not to be cocky. Hey, don't call Sasuke-kun that. Sakura yelled at him, grinding her teeth. Now it remained to be seen if it would work with Kakashi. On that note, he didn't have much hope. If Danzo had realized it, then Kakashi surely would. But it wasn't like he was doing anything illegal. Hey, how about some warming up sparring? He said, grinning at his teammates. If he didn't make an effort, it would look quite suspicious and he didn't want to make Kakashi more suspicious of him. There was no need to give him a reason to snoop on him if there wasn't one. "Dream on, Dobe," Sasuke replied, and promptly ignored Sakura's agreement with him as he walked to sit under a tree in the shade. Sakura was momentarily surprised that Naruto had turned to look at her and not at Sasuke. "Baka, why would I want to spar with you?" she sneered, all the while inner Sakura was fuming. "Cha, what does that Dobe think he is doing? Trying to be cool like Sasuke-kun so he can impress us? How pathetic." Naruto shook his head in resignation. "Why do I even try?" he mumbled to himself before something else caught his eye. Truthfully, he had already mastered the tree-walking exercise when he had gotten the scrolls, which he now suspected were from Danzo, and had taken to climbing trees with his weights on. But doing the same thing every day after his endurance and stamina training had left him a bit bored, really. Sighing dejectedly, Naruto sat down on the bench and took his newest, this time aware of the look Sakura was giving him when she spotted him. Sure, he didn't want to give away too much of his training to his teammates, but he couldn't realistically hide everything. If he was spying on the team and trying to figure out his fancy moves, he had to be ready for the fact that at some point the moody bastard might get nosy and try to do the same to him. Or, if not him, then Kakashi would get curious at some point. To his credit, though, he had left the book Danzo had given him at his house, hidden in one of the many places Naruto uses to stash things of importance. The bandage creep clearly wanted something from Naruto. While he didn't know what it was yet, he was willing to indulge the old man if it meant that he could help him. After all, Naruto needed all the help he could get. This, however, was a book on trap-making that Naruto had stolen from the library. Unlike the civilian in the shops, he couldn't fool the Chunin who worked in the library with a henge. And if she caught him doing so even once, his late-night trips into the library would be at an end. Sasuke was now very aware that something was going on. Something wrong, purely by the fact that the Dobe was reading. Whoever heard of such a thing? Truthfully, he had been a little surprised, not to mention annoyed, at the amount of times the Dobe challenged him to a spar. Given that the blonde idiot lost every time did nothing to deter him, annoyed Sasuke even more. He couldn't waste time on sparring with such a dead last. At the very least Kakashi could do, other than train him to kill his brother of course, was give him a decent sparring partner. When the Jounin bothered to show up not so late as he usually was. Sasuke already had too much on his plate and couldn't be bothered to be slowed down if he had to carry the blonde in his training as well. Which was why he had mentioned it to Kakashi, knowing that the one-eyed Cyclops would put an end to Naruto's challenges. Not for Sasuke's reasons, of course, but because in his opinion it was affecting their teamwork, which suited Sasuke just fine. Why couldn't he just train with Sakura? Those two went well together. Well, that might not be such a good idea, since he didn't even seem to be able to take one punch from her. But their strength levels were similar. In fact, the only thing that Naruto actually exceeded Sakura in was the absolutely insane amount of stamina he had. Other than that, his basics were horrendous, while Sakura's were decent. His taijutsu was horrible, and he only knew one ninjutsu, and couldn't seem to get even the basic jutsus like henge or clone right. Not to mention substitution. Sakura, however, was strong in the basics and even knew more than a couple of genjutsus. If only she would train instead of fawning over him, she'd be stronger than the Dobe. Sasuke was sure of it. And that in turn would help the team more than the fool's antics. It seems Kakashi had realized this as well, and had begun setting Sakura tasks to improve her overall strength. And yet, for all those faults, the Dobe didn't seem to realize how much of a dead last he really was. And that annoyed Sasuke more than he could put into words. And now, for the past week, Sasuke had been getting the distinct sense that something was changing. And what bothered him more was that he couldn't put his finger on it. The Dobe was the same orange, wearing idiot who couldn't even climb trees successfully, even after all the training they had done in Wave. Kakashi had told him that Naruto was still tree walking for chakra control. What a joke. Sasuke burnt with anger every time he thought about how Haku had beat him around, how he wasn't fast enough to catch the ice freak. But how then the hell had Naruto beaten him? That shouldn't be possible. It must have been a fluke, or Haku must have blundered so badly that even the dobe could have gotten the upper hand. Sasuke was sure that without some assistance, the idiot could never have beaten Haku. All Naruto had done was kept throwing his clones for them to get slaughtered. That seemed to be his go-to solution to every problem. What an idiot. Yet, where did he even get that book from? The library? Or did he ask Irika? And why was he reading anyway? The Dove had always seemed like the act first, think later ninja, if he could even be called that. Now, it was all but confirmed that something was changing as both him and Sakura watched with gaping mouths. Although he had quickly gathered himself, as the Dobe settled on the bench and took out a book of all things. Was this an imposter? Was Sasuke's first thought? In the academy, which was barely 2 months ago, Irika had barely managed to make Naruto open a book for 4 years. And now, the Dobe was voluntarily doing it? Something was going on, and Sasuke didn't like not knowing what. Okay, whatever. It's not like he could be a better ninja by reading books. With that final thought, Sasuke averted his head and got back to dreaming about how he was going to make his traitorous brother pay for his crime. How he was going to gut him, then incinerate his guts while he watched, then feed them to him. Then kill him slowly, painfully, and mercilessly. Yes, those thoughts did him good, especially since he had now finally awakened his Sharingan. Shinero, inner Sakura fumed, looking at the Dobe. As if it wasn't enough that the Dobe tried to copy Sasuke-kun to try to impress us, and now he's trying it by a book. Well, we won't even bother with him. That'll teach him a lesson. Outer Sakura immediately nodded her head and agreed with her inner version, turning to Sasuke-kun to rant about Naruto's stupidity. Naruto, instead of paying attention to his teammates, was much concerned with the fact that he sensed Kakashi's presence, but the man hadn't shown up anywhere near them, visually. Was this a Jin Jutsu like the old man had used in their first meeting? He didn't look up towards where he sensed Kakashi, wondering how long the man was going to do this. Instead, he continued reading his book. It was quite fascinating, honestly. Naruto was pleasantly surprised to see that he had been using some of the techniques in his own pranks. Naruto grinned in excitement. Sneaking into the Chunin section of the library was a great move on his part. Teammate looked at Kurenai dumbfoundedly, disbelief coloring their faces as they processed what she had said. Well, disbelief was clear on Kiba and Hinata's face. Shino just pushed his glasses up, so she supposed that counted. Suddenly, Kiba jumped up, Waiwacho, punching the air. Finally, we'll get to see who's stronger. Kurenai shook her head, slightly amused. The boy had a one-track mind. She had already predicted that this is what will appeal to the boy in their session today. It was Hinata's response that concerned her. The timid Hyuga girl pushed her fingers together in the manner she was so used to. Oh no, are we supposed to? Kurenai nodded, understanding her hesitantly asked question regardless of the broken phrases. Yes. It is logical, Shino commented, looking at Hinata. Why you ask, Hinata-san? It is because we are a specialized reconnaissance team. It is expected for us to train for such missions. Still, Hinata wasn't certain. Wiggling her finger, she said, What? Yes, but on Team 7. Kurenai sighed. She knew Hinata would have a problem with spying on Kakashi's team. She had known it even before she had been officially given her team. When she had observed her potential genin in the academy, she had quickly realized that Hinata had a soft spot for the troublemaker. Never did she think it would hinder her performance. In fact, she might even go as far as to say that it motivated Hinata. She had never seen Hinata train harder than when she did at Tezuna's house in Wave. If only it stayed at motivation and not turn into a liability. She would have to manage this carefully. Forming attachments for shinobi was always a dangerous thing, especially for those who were on duty. That was one of the reasons why it was discouraged to be on the same team with one's boyfriend or girlfriend, and why most ninja didn't think about settling down until they had retired. Hinata, she addressed the girl. I understand it may seem like a wrong thing to do, but we have to train for espionage missions. And Team 7 is one of the few teams that are a possible target for it. We'll swap targets every week. Hinata pursed her lips, but agreed nonetheless. Not that she had a choice anyway. A mission was a mission, regardless of what a ninja thought about it personally. Their feelings on the mission's objective mattered very little, and more often than not were a hindrance to the completion of the mission.